Chapter 1. In this medium-sized city, care for one's family was considered a medium-sized family. Starting from the generation of Gunan's grandfather, it was a well-known entrepreneur in the city. When Gunan's father and his two brothers were around, it was considered a real family and had mixed into the upper class. Gunan's sister, Gunyin, was going to marry someone, and there was a lot to pay attention to. In peaceful times, the marriages of rich families were always about matching families. However, Gunyin's marriage was different. She was going to marry a young boy who was just over 20 years old and had no background. Senior sister, why do you have to feign civility with a group of mortals? Why do you still want to marry that Lin guy? He's a traitor to the dojo. That's right, senior sister. You've been gone for more than half a year. We've been looking forward to you coming back. In a small courtyard in the Gu family's villa district, a man and a woman were trying their best to persuade Gu Lingji. Sitting in front of them was a young girl who was sipping her tea calmly, her expression cold and indifferent. In the face of these two junior brothers and sisters' persuasion, Gunyin didn't even look up. She said indifferently, "You guys go back. Since I left the dojo, I never thought of going back." Senior sister. The girl was anxious and looked like she was about to cry. "Since you left, Master can't fight anymore. Those people from the Golden Dojo come to cause trouble every day. If you don't come back, our dojo will collapse." Oh, Gunyin continued to look indifferent. The two of them couldn't speak for a long time. After a long time, Gunyin continued to speak slowly. "I don't care how you found me. I'm an ordinary person now, and I just want to live an ordinary life." Well said. Just when the two of them wanted to persuade her again, a young man suddenly clapped and walked out from the side. It was Gunan. The man's face suddenly turned cold. "Who are you?" "Who I am isn't important. What's important is that my sister is finally enlightened. Tell me, what era is it now? Why are you still learning martial arts?" "Huh, is martial arts faster than bullets?" Gunan was spouting nonsense at the side. His face was filled with arrogance and mockery, but his heart was calm and even a little expectant. From the first day he came to this world, he had been trying to understand it through various means. An ordinary technological plane? Gunan would definitely not believe it. The evil god temple had taken him to many subplanes, and all of them were extremely powerful. The weakest of them was a martial arts master. It was not until he heard about the existence of the dojo that Gunan felt that the door to a hidden world was slowly opening for him. What would the so-called martial arts masters here be like? With this thought in mind, Gunan took the initiative to speak, trying to provoke the man and woman who were obviously from dojo. However, to his surprise, neither of them got angry. They just looked at each other and smiled at his words. Gunan recognized that smile. It was disdain. Was this a cat that had seen a mouse jump in front of it? The expression of, well, they even looked down on him. The man and woman didn't even spare a glance at Gu-nan as they cupped their hands towards Gu-nyinji in unison, and then they swiftly retreated and vanished without a trace in a few moments. They left very quickly. Gu-nin casually complained and asked, "Sister, who are these two people?" Gu-nyinji's expression remained calm. "Zhang Qing, Zhang Yuan. They're my friends from the dojo." Gunyin had gone out to practice martial arts for 2 years. This was not a secret in care for one's family. Of course, Gunan would not be satisfied with such an answer. He thought for a while and asked from another angle, "Sister, it said that martial arts masters can leap onto roofs and vault over walls. When they reach the peak, they can move mountains and fill seas. Is that true?" "Moving mountains and filling seas is just a legend." "Then is it true that they can fly over eaves and walk on walls?" "I didn't say that." Seeing that the other party obviously did not want to continue the conversation, Gunan did not force her. He still treated this as a game. Since the NPC was not willing to say, of course, the player had not triggered the condition, so it was useless to ask. So, Gunan also turned around and said, "Sister, I'm looking forward to your wedding tonight." His voice echoed in Gunyin's small courtyard for a long time. After Gunan left, the girl slowly stood up, and her somewhat dull eyes slowly focused. "Strange variables. I hope you don't get in my way. Otherwise, even if it's you, brother, Zhang Qing and Zhang Yuan walked in the courtyard of Care for One's Family, as if they were walking in their own back garden. They came in without permission, so the decorations of these mortals were useless to them. "Brother, what do you think we should do if senior sister refuses to go back?" Zhang Yuan sighed. "She won't." Zhang Qing shook his head. "Senior sister is not the kind of person who will not remember old friendships. I think she must have her own difficulties." At this time, a sudden voice interrupted. "Oh, then what difficulties?" The siblings suddenly looked up and saw a young man standing in front of them with a smile. It was Gunan. "It's you again." Zhang Qing frowned and waved his hand impatiently. "I'm in a bad mood. Don't bother us. Otherwise, senior sister won't be able to save face." Gunan smiled and directly reached out to grab Zhang Qing's wrist, pulling him back. Zhang Qing only felt a strong force, and his whole body was about to fall forward. His expression instantly changed. However, it was too late for him to exert force. He simply adjusted his position slightly, and his body fell forward on its own. He was also very experienced. Of course, being passive was not as good as being active, and he even had a chance to counterattack. "Kid, I'll let you know my power later." Zhang Qing instantly adjusted his state of mind, and a cold smile appeared on his face. He was just a normal person. However, he had no idea that Gu Nan was a professional player who had played virtual combat for more than 10 years. His combat experience was not inferior to that of a veteran who had been through hundreds of battles. Only players could die thousands of times to accumulate experience. Gu Nan slightly stepped to the side, and Zhang Qing's counterattack directly missed. Then, he casually slammed his palm on Zhang Qing's back. The monstrous force caused Zhang Qing to spit out a mouthful of blood, and his whole body fell to the ground. This situation not only shocked the Zhang siblings, but even Gunan himself was a little stunned. The two of them looked so imposing and domineering, but how could they be so weak? With just one exchange, Gunan had a rough idea of the level of his opponent. In terms of physical fitness, these two people were probably about the same as when he was at rank 1. They were slightly stronger than normal people, but they definitely had not broken through the limit. And with the strength of his rank 2 Cthulhu body, he was definitely inhuman in all aspects. It was not something these two people could compare to. The younger sister Zhang Yuan was also stunned. When this person in front of her attacked, she could not see the slightest internal energy flow, but he still slapped her brother until he spat out blood. What kind of enemy was this? No matter what, she definitely could not win, so she turned around and wanted to escape. Thus, Gunan was also amused. If there was anything that players were best at, it was definitely not fighting head-on, but the last hit and beating the enemy when they were down. Chapter 2. After a while, the Zhang siblings were brought to a corner by Gunan. Gunan had already dislocated the joints on both of Zhang Qing's arms, and his left leg had been fractured. This was the biggest blow to his fighting ability, and, at the same time, the two of them couldn't escape. "Tell me, what happened to my sister?" Gunan stretched out his hand and pinched Zhang Yuan's little face. Zhang Qing, who was lying on the side, was burning with anger. He wanted to bite off a piece of meat from Gunan's body. I'm not too sure either," Zhang Yuan said with a sobbing tone. There were still traces of tears on her face. She looked at Gunan carefully, as if she was afraid that he would be unhappy. This wasn't a threat to her brother, but Gunan had already beaten her up. Zhang Yuan's escape was, of course, unsuccessful. She was caught by Gunan and directly beaten up. Now, there was not a single part of her body that was uninjured. For an experienced player like Gunan, the gender of an NPC was just a visual difference. It was all the same when he fought. Hearing this answer, Gunan's eyes suddenly widened, startling Zhang Yuan again. She quickly waved her hands. "No, I remember now. Zhang Yuan took a deep breath and looked at her brother, who was lying on the side. She could only grit her teeth and tell him everything. Anyway, it was just some basic information about Big Senior's sister. It wasn't a big secret, right? What she didn't know was that the basic information she told them had helped Gunan a lot. You're saying that Gunyan showed great talent when she started learning martial arts a few years ago. She quickly became your big senior sister, but then she left without saying a word. And the Lin Feng she's going to marry is the disciple that was kicked out of your dojo, and he was infatuated with my sister when he was learning martial arts? That's about it. Zhang Yuan slightly lowered her head and looked at Gunan. She really told him everything she knew. She just hoped that this person wouldn't make things difficult for the two of them. Gunan rubbed his chin and pondered. There's clearly something fishy going on here, but looking at Gun Yin's appearance, it doesn't seem like he's fallen in love. As a player, after Gunan entered the quest mode, he did not put himself in the shoes of the plot anymore. He did not care about whether he was a sister or not. He was only interested in the plot now. It seems like the root of all this lies with that Lin Feng. Why does this name sound like the main character? For male novels, there were rules for naming the protagonists. For example, names like Lin, Yi, Wang were all common surnames. If they were paired with words like Feng, Chun, or something similar, it would be a good name. As for a lousy name like Gunan, it was obvious that he did not have the fate of a protagonist. Gunan didn't know much about Lin Feng before. He only knew that Lin Feng had helped care for one's family, so his family wanted him to be their son-in-law. The most suitable candidate was his sister, Gunyan. When the background story was not needed, players would not deliberately look into it. They would only slowly search for it when the quest came. That was what Gunan was doing now. He ran to the archive room of his house and read Lin Feng's resume from beginning to end. He was shocked by what he saw. This was the template of the urban soldier king return style. He grew up in the mountains. A few years ago, he learned martial arts in a martial arts school. Later, because of some disputes, he was expelled from the school and went to the army. Less than half a year later, he was fired for contradicting his superiors and returned to his hometown, Feng City. This time, it was out of control. The domineering sister, the big-breasted policewoman, the campus belle, one after another. Oh, it was a cameo. In short, Lin Feng had a lot of women around him. Even Gu Yin miraculously returned to her hometown. Then, as the daughter of a rich family, she was married to Lin Feng. According to the Zhang siblings, Gu Yin was Lin Feng's first love. No, it should be the object of his secret love. Gu Yin also read the details of the incident in the records. It was simple. It was nothing more than an old man from care for one's family who went crazy and wanted to go to Wutai Mountain. In the end, he had a heart attack on the plane. Fortunately, Lin Feng was there. He used his family's acupuncture skills to save his life. Yes. A few needles can cure a heart attack. Gunan calmly closed the file, a sneer on his face. If it was a coincidence, then it was too much of a coincidence. Gu Nanning believed that someone had specially arranged this for Lin Feng. But who would have such a grand plan? And what was the purpose of this person? I have to go see Lin Feng first. Pink cherry blossoms slowly fell in the tranquil campus. A beautiful, short-haired girl in a school uniform walked in front, skipping forward. Occasionally, she would look back and shout, "Lin Feng, hurry up! How dare you call yourself a soldier king? You're so slow." Leisurely following behind the young girl was a young man with a crew cut. He jogged to catch up, but his mouth said helplessly, "My dear Miss Yang, I'm a bodyguard, not a stroll companion." Lin Feng smiled wryly. The girl in front of him was called Yang Lan. She was said to be the most beautiful girl in the university. But Lin Feng wasn't interested. He had already flirted with many women in the past few months since returning to Feng City. He was in no mood to flirt with another. If it weren't for his old friend's request, he wouldn't have the time to be a bodyguard for a girl from a big family. Sometimes Lin Feng couldn't understand why so many women fell in love with him. Yang Lan looked at Lin Feng with her big, beautiful eyes. She smiled and said, "Isn't it the same? Besides, be careful." Before Yang Lan could finish her sentence, Lin Feng's expression suddenly changed, and he pushed her down onto the ground. Just as the two of them fell to the ground, a small black shadow flew over them and landed on the ground next to Yang Lan, smashing a small hole in the ground. Only then did the two of them see that the black shadow was actually a pebble. Expert, Lin Feng's heart sank. To be able to use a pebble like that, the opponent must be an expert in hidden weapons. And this kind of opponent was usually the type of person bodyguards hated the most. If the opponent is hiding in the dark, then Yang Lan is in danger. Lin Feng looked around vigilantly. Just as he was about to say something to provoke the opponent, he saw a figure slowly walk out. Huh, he's coming out just like that. Gu Nan didn't know what Lin Feng was thinking. He didn't know how to use hidden weapons. The pebble was strong because of his strength. It had nothing to do with technique. A rank 2 demon god's body could crush a human's. Brother Gu? Yang Lan couldn't help but cry out when she saw Gu Nan. Gu Nan was slightly taken aback. He rubbed his nose helplessly. He hadn't inherited much of his previous life's memories. He didn't expect the school beauty he was protecting to recognize him. Chapter 3. How strong was Gu Nan's punch? Even Lin Feng, who had an extraordinary physique, was knocked unconscious by one punch. If it hit an ordinary person like Li Jingying, the consequences would be unimaginable. The girl's face paled at a speed visible to the naked eye. Then, she spat out a mouthful of blood and knelt on the ground. Based on Gu Nan's many years of experience in killing NPCs, this punch had already caused Li Jingying's stomach to bleed profusely. The other organs were probably also shaken and had problems with displacement. Her chances of survival were slim. In fact, this was because Gu Nan didn't use his full strength. Otherwise, it was possible that Li Jingying's abdomen would have burst. Ah, I want you to die. Li Jingying's miserable state provoked Lin Feng. He fiercely pulled out the knife from his shoulder and rushed forward at an astonishing speed. He stabbed the knife into Gu Nan's chest. Clang! The sound of metal colliding could be heard. This ordinary fruit knife only pierced through Gu Nan's clothes and then directly broken to pieces by his muscles. Did he explode? Unfortunately, he is still too weak. If this is all he has, Gu Nan regretfully shook his head. He seriously injured Li Jingying because he wanted to see what kind of surprise Lin Feng could give him. Unfortunately, it was not enough. Invulnerable to swords and spears, body is hard as iron and stone. Physical Xiantian master? Huh. Gu Nan turned his head and saw that old man Li Qingwei had unknowingly approached him. His hands were trembling as he hugged Li Jingying. However, the latter had long since stopped moving. The tragedy happened too quickly. So quickly that even Li Qingwei couldn't stop it. His heart was filled with anger and self-blame. He hated himself for being conceited. If it wasn't for his conceit that no one would dare to touch his granddaughter, how could he act so rashly? So the old man put Li Jingying down with slightly trembling hands. He stood up and fiercely stared at Gu Nan with bloodshot eyes. To be able to enter the Xiantian realm at such a young age, you are indeed extraordinary. Li Qinghui's voice seemed to be hiding a hidden storm. He slowly rolled up his sleeves. I don't care which family's disciple you are. Your methods are so ruthless. Even an ordinary person like Li Jingying were killed. Today, this old man will do justice on behalf of heaven, for the martial world. Bang! Before Li Qingwei could finish his words, Gu Nan's figure instantly appeared in front of him. He directly punched the old man's head, and Li Qingwei was sent flying. You're so weak, yet you still talk so much nonsense. Gu Nan was very confused. He didn't understand why these people were talking so much instead of preparing for a fight. Master! Shouted Lin Feng again. He didn't know where he had found the strength to fight against Gu Nan, but the result was the same. After Lin Feng was beaten black and blue, Gu Nan smiled and patted his cheek. If you want to take revenge on me, remember to come to my house tonight to get married. Half an hour later, Gu Nan returned to care for one's family, playing with a jade pendant in his hand, which was the one that Li Jingying had before. Gu Nan had some doubts about the origins of these women, but he didn't think that they would know much, so he was more interested in this jade pendant. It could warn Lin Feng of danger and lead the Li family's grandfather and grandson to the warehouse. This was already beyond the scope of martial arts. Unfortunately, since it was in Gu Nan's hands, this jade pendant seemed to have lost its spirit. It no longer had the faint fluorescence it had before. It was just like an ordinary antique. However, with Gu Nan's intuition, he could clearly feel that this jade pendant hid a huge amount of energy. Even if it burst out a little bit, it was enough to destroy the current him. It's at least rank 4 energy. As a former rank 16 evil god, Gunan had a very accurate grasp of the level of energy. It was also because of this that he felt strange. A group of small characters who hadn't even reached rank 2 actually had a rank 4 item. This in itself was very unusual. At the thought of this, Gunan instantly understood who he should look for next. Gunyin sat alone in the courtyard, still sipping on a cup of fragrant tea, but she felt a little uneasy. A martial artist at her level had an indescribable sense of many things. In fact, even a fool could see that there was something wrong with her little brother's strange attitude, but she just didn't know what the problem was. Just as she was carefully thinking about the whole matter, a photo suddenly floated down from above her. How sharp was Gunyin's spiritual sense? She almost subconsciously reached out and caught the photo in her hand. But the content of the photo made her pupils shrink. It was a jade pendant. Looks like you recognize this. Gunan walked out of the shadows with a faint smile, his hands behind his back. He actually forced himself to pretend to be an expert. The dragon jade is in your hands? Gunyin still maintained a calm expression, and even his voice didn't change. Only the hand that put down the teacup trembled slightly. Gunan perfectly captured this detail and asked curiously, "This jade pendant is called the dragon jade?" Gunyin's gaze became extremely strange. "You don't recognize it? How many people have racked their brains to obtain this dragon jade? I didn't expect that it would be obtained by an unknowing person like you. What's its use?" Gunyin didn't want to pay attention to the girl's doubts and asked directly. Gunyin didn't hesitate and said bluntly, "The use of the dragon jade isn't a big secret. Some old people in the martial arts world know. The dragon jade is a treasure of luck. Whoever gets the dragon jade can get the luck of the world." She paused and then looked at Gunan. In the martial arts world, the dragon jade is related to the inheritance of a senior. Which senior? Sword Devil Mo Bai. Gunan nodded. He knew that the treasure of luck was basically nonsense. The inheritance of the martial arts world senior Mo Bai was probably the key to the group of people fighting for it. If that's the case, Gunan took out a jade pendant from his pocket. It was the dragon jade. With this, I can obtain the inheritance? Gunyin's gaze stopped on the dragon jade and then moved away. It's not that simple. The inheritance was left by Mo Bai for his descendants. He also specially found a protector clan to protect the dragon jade for his descendants. Don't tell me it needs the blood of a descendant of the Mo family to activate the inheritance? Gunan frowned and felt a bit of a headache. It's even more troublesome. It needs the descendant of the blood to activate the inheritance. Gunyin shook his head. All right, Mo Bai is the name of the sword devil after he became famous. His surname is Lin. Oh, Gunan said. He now understood why Gunyin agreed to marry Lin Feng. Marriage was fake. Getting close to him was the real goal. Thinking of this, Gunan smiled and said, "Since you have already made arrangements, I won't interfere. When you need this dragon jade, don't hesitate to call me." In reality, he was saying, go ahead and play. In the end, don't come looking for me. The dragon jade is in my hands. Later, don't forget to take your photo. Chapter 4. For a true martial arts master, even a flying flower or a leaf could injure someone. Gunyin was undoubtedly a master of this level. She threw the thin photo with one hand, and like a sharp hidden weapon, it directly slashed across Gunnan's neck. The sound of metal colliding could be heard again. Gunan didn't even dodge and directly used his neck to take the hit. This wasn't because Gunnan was pretending, but because he had no other choice, because Gunyin was already in front of him. Ever since Gunnan had advanced, he'd been able to kill anyone who stood in his way. Even that seemingly formidable old man wasn't a match for him. This more or less caused him to feel slightly arrogant. Arrogant people always need to be taught a lesson. Taking advantage of the opportunity of the hidden weapon, Gunyin was able to make a move at the first moment, and in an instant, Gunnan was at a disadvantage. From Gunnan's point of view, his opponent's physical fitness wasn't strong. At most, it was slightly stronger than the old man, but there was a limit to it. But every time they exchanged fists, Gunyin's hands seemed to have a strange force that removed more than half of his strength. And every time he was punched, that force would be like a snake, quickly drilling into his body. After a few rounds, Gunan only felt that there were countless small snakes wandering around his body, and his movements began to change. But what Gunan didn't know was that Gunyin was actually even more frightened at this time. She had already seen that Gunan cultivated the innate realm of external martial arts. In the martial arts world, when external martial arts entered the innate realm, it couldn't be compared to the traditional internal martial arts, whether it was fighting power or status. When internal martial arts reached the innate realm, the flexible use of internal strength was enough to make external martial arts masters suffer. Moreover, internal chi also had the effect of nourishing one's health, and one's lifespan would increase by a lot. Generally speaking, only those who knew that it was impossible to cultivate internal martial arts to the innate realm would focus on external martial arts. But this little brother in front of her, when in the martial arts world, there was such a level of external martial arts. It was true that physical experts had stronger physical strength, but it was unheard of to be able to resist the power of inner strength with just their bodies. A normal external martial artist would not be able to get up after being hit by a few inner strength attacks. However, he had clearly punched his opponent more than 10 times, yet he still looked as if nothing had happened. With another punch, Gunan and Gunyin both retreated at the same time. Gunan shook his hands and even jumped twice, as if he wanted to shake off the little snakes on his body. Gunyinji, on the other hand, hurriedly adjusted her breath on the spot. She almost couldn't catch her breath after the round of crazy attacks just now. This is the internal fist force. Interesting. When the Qi gene was completely removed, Gunan smiled at the dumbfounded female expert, then turned around and left. The battle with Gunyin was within Gunan's expectations, but the process was worth pondering. It seems that those martial arts experts who cultivate internal strength still have some fighting power when they reach the innate realm. Is the innate realm equivalent to level 2? That old manly was so weak, most likely because I attacked too quickly. He didn't even have the chance to use his inner strength before he was defeated. Which means that once an internal martial artist is ambushed, he might not be that strong. Gunan summarized the level of this world's martial artists, as well as the weaknesses that he could use. He actually understood the difference between him and those external innate martial artists. The so-called external innate martial artists completely relied on external forces to train their bodies. Not only did they leave countless internal injuries in the body, but the effects were only on the surface of the body. What he had experienced was the power of the evil god's temple to help him advance. His body's quality was improved from the inside to the outside. It was simply too high. After Gunan left, Gunyin slowly sat back down, and a black shadow slowly appeared beside her. "Miss, do you need me to investigate this Gunan?" "There's no need." Gunyin interrupted without hesitation. "No matter what kind of adventure he had, he is still my brother. Karma is hard to break. When things are over here, we might as well bring him back with us. This reincarnation is really not worth it." The black shadow's voice was a little feminine, but also a little old. It was hard to tell whether it was a man or a woman. The voice paused for a moment, and then said, "Miss, if that thing is really in the sword demon's inheritance, then it's fine. But if it's just a rumor, we don't have much time." Hearing this, Gunyin looked a little worried. She could only comfort herself. "We've searched all the suspicious places. The sword demon's inheritance is the only one left. Moreover, it's too late to talk about it now. Whether it succeeds or not, we'll find out tonight." In the evening, the entire upper class of Feng City was mobilized to a high-end hotel in the west of the city. It couldn't be helped. Miss Care for One's family was getting married, and her groom was Lin Feng, the most popular person in the city. The hotel in the west of the city was a little out of the way, and it wasn't the best. However, it was said that Miss Care for One's family had chosen herself, so everyone had to make do with it. "Mr. Wong, you're here too? Oh, isn't this our Mr. Sun? Old Master Gu personally sent us an invitation. Who wouldn't want to give him face?" That's right. There was still half an hour before the wedding started, and almost all the guests had arrived. Care for One's family attached great importance to this wedding. Not only had they sent out invitations, but they had also used many of their connections to make the event as grand as possible. Many old people who usually didn't show up were also invited to the wedding. To put it bluntly, most of the people in Feng City were in this hotel. If a missile were to be dropped here, the whole city would immediately be paralyzed. The groom is here. The groom. Hey, young Master Feng, what's going on? A commotion came from the direction of the entrance. Many people looked in that direction and saw Lin Feng walking in with a sullen face. He was followed by a large group of people. There were about a dozen people behind Lin Feng. All of them had white hair and wrinkled faces, but they all looked quite extraordinary. At a glance, it was obvious that they were not ordinary people. The person in charge of the Hall of Care for one's family was Gu Xinming, the third son of care for one's family. He quickly came to stop the group. Lin Feng, what are you doing? Lin Feng reluctantly cupped his hands and said, Third uncle, these are my elders. They're here to ask for an explanation for my master. Elders? Gu Ximing looked at the dozen old men in puzzlement. That's right. An old man behind Lin Feng snorted and stepped forward. I'm Zhang Songha from Bai Yin School. Shun Ruo from Yin Wu School. Chun Baiwan from Nine Segments Fist. Wang Mingxin from Single-Hearted Sword. Yin Dong from Tyrant Fist. By the time the dozen old men had finished announcing their names, the crowd had already fallen silent. These upper-class people of Feng City had some understanding of the martial arts world. At this time, they were shocked. These people were actually the legendary martial arts masters. Each one of them was a martial arts master who had been famous for decades. Like thunder piercing the ears. Famous all over the world. What kind of matter and what kind of people could provoke these dozen famous martial arts masters at the same time? Zhang Songha, who seemed to be the leader of the 8 Wild Goose School, took another step forward and said in a deep voice, We, the old bastards, have come this time to seek justice for the martial arts world senior, Sacred Hand of Annihilation Li Qingwei. Chapter 5. If Lin Feng's life experience was written down, Gunan could easily imagine what kind of feelings he had for Gunyan. He had learned martial arts from Li Qingwei since he was a child. After he had achieved a small success, he had gone to the martial arts center to learn combat techniques. He had thought he was a small master, but he had met someone like Gunyan. That was how his feelings had been buried. After he returned from the army, more and more women appeared around him, but he was only willing to marry Gunyan. He had even put his childhood sweetheart, Li Jingying, aside, and now Gunan was telling him that Gunyan and he had been indecent for a long time. This was like throwing feces in Lin Feng's face. If he didn't go crazy, he would be letting down his protagonist template. When Zhang Songha saw that Lin Feng was rushing towards him, he gnashed his teeth and shouted furiously, Gunan, you have violated the rules of morality. You will not be forgiven. Today I will kill you. After a lot of words, it could be summed up in 2 words, brothers. Indeed, they had to go. They still had 12 Xiantian masters left. Even though they were all injured, they were still a force to be reckoned with. Gunan was nearly invincible with the pillar in his hand, but he alone was not enough. As long as one of them could get close, the eyes of the 12 martial arts legends shone with the light of sacrificing their lives for righteousness. Then, boom, Gunan was not going to be polite with them. He directly smashed one of them with the pillar. That person flew backward and was embedded in the wall. All the bones in his body were broken. There was no hope for him. Old Huang. A few sorrowful cries came, but no one slowed down. They knew that they couldn't let their companions die in vain. They had to do everything possible to get close to this demon. Only then would they have a chance to defeat him. But these were the most precious treasures of the martial arts world. To die here in vain. The hearts of the legends were bleeding. They all swore that when they took down this guy, they would make him kneel in front of the masters and kowtow in apology. Unfortunately, fantasizing couldn't solve the problem. Gunan had been standing in place the whole time. All he wanted was to deal damage. With a few precise swings of the pillar, a few generals from the legendary team were sent off. By the time Zhang Songha was the first to approach Gunan, only half of the 12 legendary figures were left. 2 of them had fallen to the ground with serious injuries, and only 4 of them could still fight. At this time, Zhang Songha's eyes were also red, almost dripping blood. He roared, "Die, you little thief!" He fiercely slammed his palm towards Gunan, but something unexpected happened. Gunan actually laughed out loud, casually threw down the pillar he was relying on, and sprinted away like a monkey. Zhang Songhe was dumbfounded. He had never imagined that Gunan would actually run away. But that didn't seem to be wrong. The other party was unscathed. If he really wanted to escape, who would be able to stop him? After Gunan quickly pulled away, he came to the side of another pillar and pulled out another pillar in the same way. Well, they were back to square one again. Gunan might still be in the mood to hum a song, but Zhang Songhe and the others were in despair. They had paid such a big price, but it was only to change the opponent's position. Just as Zhang Songhe was in a daze, he suddenly heard a few shouts. "Brother Zhang, quickly go and kill this little thief." Zhang Songhe quickly looked up and saw that the two people who had fallen to the ground with serious injuries had stood up at some point, and were even clinging to the pillar tightly. Although their bodies were injured, their inner breath was not much damaged. This time, they used their exquisite inner strength to forcibly hold Gunan in place. If Gunan abruptly let go, the inner energy that the two of them had already poured into the pillar would immediately rebound onto his body. Zhang Songhe's eyes were a little wet. Using the pillar to carry the inner strength was completely using one's weakness to attack the enemy's strength. This was the last resort. Whether it succeeded or not, the two people who held Gunan would not have a good ending. But now, there was only a glimmer of hope by using this last resort. On the other side, Gunan sneered. "Using inner strength to hold the pillar? I want to see how much inner strength you can fill in." Bang! Another muffled sound, and the pillar that was as wide as a person was actually pushed over by him. It hit the two people's chests hard, and directly caused them to vomit blood. "Let's do it!" At this moment, except for Zhang Songhe, the other three people said in unison. They rushed to the edge of the pillar and used their strength to lift it. With three more people joining in, Gunan actually could not get rid of them for a while. "Brother Zhang," the five people shouted in unison. Zhang Songhe also did not say anything and directly rushed to Gunan. He shouted for the second time, "Little thief, die! Idiot!" They only saw Gunan sneer. He quickly took a step back and kicked away Zhang Songhe's palm. Then, he used his legs to firmly lock the latter's neck. Everyone was dumbstruck. No one had imagined that under the circumstances that Gunan's hands were unable to move, he was still able to perform such an inconceivable action. In terms of skill, how could these old men who had not fought for decades be a match for Gunan? The five people on the other side of the pillar finally seemed to be unable to hold their breath, and their faces all turned gray. Zhang Songhe's neck was choked to the point where he could not breathe, but he still stared unwaveringly at Gunan. He only hated that he could not personally kill this little thief. But at this moment, a flash of light suddenly appeared in his eyes. He did not know when, but a figure had already appeared behind Gunan. His eyes were bloodshot, and a terrifying qi surged around his body. Every movement seemed to carry a great power. It was Lin Feng. Moreover, it was Lin Feng who had broken through to the innate realm, and his qi was still unstable. Zhang Songhe did not have time to think, and hurriedly shouted, "Feng, air! Do it!" And indeed, as he said, Lin Feng fiercely punched the back of Gunan's head. This punch contained a surge of inner breath. This punch represented the dignity of the internal martial art. This punch also represented the last hope of justice in the world. Justice will eventually prevail over evil. Lin Feng roared in his heart. The scene seemed to freeze. Lin Feng, Zhang Songhe, and the remaining five old men were all staring unwaveringly at Gunan's body. They firmly believed that Gunan, who did not have any foundation in internal martial arts, would be killed by this punch. Only Gunan, who was still standing in the corner of the second floor, lightly shook her head. Even a martial artist like her, who had entered the innate realm for many years, had no effect on Gunan's body after dozens of punches. Lin Feng had just entered the innate realm. It would be strange if he could injure a martial artist who practiced the path of the body. Gunan's hands loosened, and the pillar heavily fell to the ground, making a loud noise. Gunan, on the other hand, slowly turned around and rubbed the back of his head helplessly. Hey, you're hurting me quite a bit. Chapter 6. I really don't understand you. It was supposed to be so easy to solve. In the basement of the hotel, under the dim light, Gunyan was carrying the unconscious Lin Feng with one hand and said helplessly to Gunan. Gunan was not in a mood to talk to her. He was focused on the evil god's temple in his mind. A line of words slowly appeared. Event completed. Total sin points, 5. 5 points. Gunan almost jumped up in excitement. The evil god's temple only assigned a total of 5 points for this event, and he actually got all of them. Don't think that getting all the sin points was easy. As a veteran player of Evil God Raising for more than 10 years, Gunan was very clear about the nature of events and dungeon quests. Even for an expert like him, getting all the sin points in 1 out of 10 events would be a miracle. Not to mention, he had never seen a dungeon quest with a completion rate of more than 95%. It was even more ridiculous after becoming the evil god's temple. Killing an entire family only gave 1 sin point. Now that he got 5 sin points in one go, Guamnan sin points suddenly increased to 16, and the requirement to advance to grade 3 was only, 50 points. However, breaking through 15 sin points meant that Guamnan's remaining 200 points could finally be put to use. Hey, what are you daydreaming about? Gunyan patted Gunan's arm and asked. Gunan raised his head blankly. He was still immersed in joy, thinking about what he should exchange his 200 points for. Gunyan rolled her eyes. She pointed at Lin Feng and said, Let's go. Mo Bai's tomb is just ahead. Go ahead. Don't forget me if you find anything good, Gunan said perfunctorily as he took out the dragon jade and threw it to Gunyan. This time, it was Gunyan's turn to be dumbfounded. She had imagined that Gunan would hand over the dragon jade to her in countless ways, with all kinds of conditions or prices, but she had never thought that he would throw it over like this, like throwing an eraser. In fact, Gunan wasn't interested in the dragon jade or the sword demon's relic. He just wanted to earn some sin points. Now that the incident was over, what was the use of the dragon jade? Gunan's consciousness had already sunk into the evil divine palace. His figure once again appeared on the dark purple throne, looking down at the empty hall. If your sin value exceeds 15 points, you can open the equipment shop. Please select the first column to open the item. Weapon. The experienced Gu-Nin made his choice without hesitation. Before the players completed their first class advancement and reached level 6, the game was basically still in the beginner mode, teaching the players step by step how to develop themselves. The second tier of instruction was related to equipment selection. There were a total of 3 equipment categories: weapon, armor, and accessory. When the player had 15, 30, and 45 sin points respectively, the player could choose to unlock one of them. The order was usually determined by the player's development path. As an agility-type player, what Gunan needed the most was a weapon. Crimson Flame Sword, Spell Breaker Blade, Nine Heavens Divine Fire Claw, Split Axe. Familiar names appeared in front of Gu-Nan one after another. He scrolled down the list and quickly found the target he had already chosen. 4-element crossbow, level 2 crossbow-type weapon. No reloading required. Can generate 4 elemental bolts of earth, water, wind, and fire according to the user's request. Costs 180 points. As an experienced player for many years, Gunan was very clear about the advantages and disadvantages of agility-type evil gods. If it wasn't strengthened by strength or physique, it meant that it didn't have enough offensive capabilities. Otherwise, the evil god would have the ability to take on more than 3 innate masters. If it wasn't strengthened by spirit, it meant that it wouldn't be able to obtain any skills before level 3. It was very simple and could easily be targeted by others. Its advantage was that it was very agile, able to fight and run. Even a level 3 innate master might not be able to catch up with it. It was precisely because of these characteristics that Gu-Nan chose the 4-element crossbow for himself. Crossbow-type weapons were very easy to use. Moreover, its range could be short or long, and it was very flexible. Most importantly, long-range attacks combined with Gunan's movement speed, he finally had the ability to kite. If he were to face those innate masters again, he was confident that he could kite them to death in less than a quarter of an hour. After an unknown amount of time, when Gun Yin returned to the basement, a relieved smile hung on his face. Lin Feng was long gone. Presumably, he didn't have a good ending. Looks like you found what you were looking for. Gunan couldn't help but smile when he saw her expression. Not bad. Gun Yin's handsome face was not stingy with his smile. If I found that thing, this trip of mine won't be in vain. Gunan smiled non-committally. That's it then. If there's such a good thing in the future, remember to call me. The more far-reaching an event was, the easier it was to generate sim points. Of course, Gunan didn't want to miss out on this sim point ATM. Hey, wait. Gun Yin hurriedly stopped him. Is there anything else? Your cultivation must have been inherited from an ancient cultivator. How much do you know about the outside world? Gunan was stunned. Wasn't this a parallel world to Earth? How could there be another world? You mean an extraterrestrial galaxy? He weighed his tone and tentatively asked. Gun Yin gently shook his head. Feng City and more than 10 cities around it are only in this Langya world. There are 33 main heavens and 72 boundaries in the heavens. Below the boundaries are countless small worlds. Gunan calmed down at this moment. This sounded like the plot of a fantasy novel that he was familiar with. You mean that our Langya world is just a small world? If I want to continue leveling up, I have to go out and change maps? Something like that. Why do these words sound so strange coming out of your mouth? There is nothing strange about it. This is all common sense. Gunan waved his hand with an inscrutable face. Gun Yin looked at him for a while, as if she was looking at a fool. Finally, she sighed and explained the structure of the heavens and worlds to him. According to Gun Yin, she came from the star world, one of the 72 boundaries. She reincarnated into this small world to find a secret treasure of her sect. She told Gunan so much because she wanted to ask if he was willing to go back to the star world with her. Go back to the big map together? How do we go back? Break a void barrier with a finger? Gunan's imagination went wild. It was as if he could already see Gun Yin opening the world. Gun Yin's face darkened. She felt that her brother was a normal person. Why did he become so cute after knowing the secret of the heavens and worlds? No one can break the world barrier unless they are masters of the breaking world realm. If we want to go between the two worlds, we can only rely on reincarnation. Chapter 7. Eldest senior sister, what's a boy toy? What are you asking? Oh, big brother. What is? Call me daddy, and I'll tell you. Their conversation echoed on the empty street. Gun Yin felt his face turning darker and darker. Fortunately, they had finally arrived at their destination. The entire town was the so-called Bright Ascension Center, but ascension to different places had to be carried out in different areas. The place Gun Yin brought the two to was the ascension area to the 9th star region of the astral realm. Get into the ascension ship. Someone will remind you what to do later. See you in the astral realm. After leaving such an irresponsible sentence, Gun Yin's figure quickly disappeared. Gunan and Cabbage looked around blankly, only to see two beams of light suddenly fall from the sky, enveloping the two of them. Gunan felt a strange force surrounding his body. His entire body floated in the air and slowly flew upward. When he was in the air, he saw what the so-called ascension ship was. It was an airship similar to a goblin airship, quietly floating in the air, and the beam of light shot out from a gap on it. What are you thinking about? The process was very slow. Cabbage could not help but ask curiously when she saw that Gunan was deep in thought. Gunan casually made up a story. I'm thinking about the principle of this beam of light. Oh, then do you understand? I think I understand. It must be using the levitation force field to counteract gravity and then mixed in the beam of light with absorption particles, causing a local pressure, and the pressure below automatically pushed us up. This explanation stunned the little girl, and she said in shock, You're amazing, but why do I feel like there's a suction force coming from above? Oh, because I'm talking nonsense. Half an hour later, Gunan stood at the side of the ascension ship, smiling as he sent off the staff who had received them, while the little girl, Bailuluo, was still standing there sulking. Hey, what are you doing? I hate it when people lie to me. Someone just reincarnated into my body. I wasn't the one talking. Do you think I'm a kid? You? Yes. Bang. The little lowly angrily slammed the door shut. Gunan shrugged helplessly and walked to the deck. There was still some time before the Ascension ship would depart, so he decided to take a stroll. Of course, more importantly, there was a series of noises coming from the deck, which immediately aroused Gunan's interest in watching the show. Although he couldn't be the main character, Gunan still played the role of an onlooker very professionally. There were more than 10 people standing on the deck. Most of them were just like Gunan, watching the fun. The main characters were two men, one tall and one short. They were mocking and ridiculing a young woman. Between the two parties, there was a young man who looked like a staff mediating. "Brother, what's going on?" Gunan touched the arm of the person next to him and asked curiously. The person Gunan asked was a bald man who looked a little funny. He had a happy expression on his face. "Brother, you're also an Ascender, right? You're not from the Imperial capital?" "No, I'm from Feng City." "I told you, if you're from the Imperial capital, you'll definitely know these people." The bald man laughed and then explained to Gunan. It was not a very complicated story. It was nothing more than a particularly powerful reincarnator coming to the Imperial capital to find a few good seedlings to take as disciples. The two men, one tall and one short, were the chosen ones. The tall one was called Luo Miao, and the short one was Kai Yuani. The former was the descendant of a big family in the Imperial capital, while the latter was an ordinary commoner. Logically speaking, this pair of brothers should be fighting openly and secretly. However, on one hand, Luo Miao was more tactful, and on the other hand, it was because of this woman. This woman's name is Qin Xuanji. She's the daughter of a small bureaucrat in the Imperial capital. Her family has just been ruined. But do you know what happened after that? What do you think? Gunan flattered him. The bald man tilted his face and lowered his voice. "I heard that this Qin Xuanji crawled naked to that person's door and knelt all night. Finally, that person accepted her." The person, of course, referred to the master of Luo Miao and Kai Yuani. Oh, Gunan suddenly understood. He looked at the bald man and smiled. Their faces showed a smile that only men would understand. However, Gunan's heart was extremely calm. From the moment he saw this Qin Xuanji, he had a faint feeling of thorns on his back, as if he was facing an ancient monster. There's something wrong with this woman. Gunan made such a judgment in his heart. As if to verify his guess, the evil temple in his sea of consciousness suddenly shook slightly, and a line of small words emerged. Detected a new dungeon, challenge dungeon, Qin Xuanji. Do you accept? Accept. Gunan subconsciously chose to accept before coming to his senses. It was a challenge dungeon. In evil god cultivation, the dungeon's mechanism was quite complicated. The dungeons that Gunan had completed before were all quest dungeons. Normally, they were divided into small, medium, and large according to size. They could be entered repeatedly, but once completed, they would disappear. In other words, the core of a quest dungeon was the quest. After completing the quest and obtaining the reward, the dungeon could no longer be entered. However, challenge dungeons were different. Challenge dungeons were specially designed for combat-type players. The goal of the dungeon was to defeat the challenger. After winning, they could continue to challenge the dungeon. However, challenge dungeons had a time limit. Compared to Gunan's current dungeon, it could only be used for one day. Even Gun Yin couldn't trigger a challenge dungeon, but this woman can? Gunan frowned, but his heart was thinking. Challenge dungeons will be generated based on the player's experience and choose a challenging target. If the evil god's temple's judgment logic was the same, did that mean that this Qin Xuanji was stronger than Gun Yin? Without another word, Gunan chose to enter the dungeon. After all, compared to the real world, time in dungeons was completely frozen. He only needed an instant to enter and exit. Challenge dungeons were no different from the games in Gunan's past life. It was still an empty arena. When Gunan entered, Qin Xuanji was already standing at the side of the arena. The moment Gunan's figure appeared, she rushed over at lightning speed and threw a punch at Gunan's face. So fast. Gunan's reaction was also very fast. He quickly turned his face, and the petite but hard fist almost grazed his face. The wind from the fist made his hair stand on end. It would be terrible if my hands were bigger, he silently rejoiced in his heart, but his hands did not slow down. Gunan quickly kicked out and directly swept his leg. Gunan was extremely confident in this kick. He knew that the so-called martial artists in this world valued martial arts, but not fighting techniques. This kind of small adaptability was what they were least good at. However, he did not expect that Qin Xuanji's reaction was not slow at all. With one hand on her abdomen, she bent her leg slightly. She was swept by Gunan's leg, and her whole body flew out, but she steadily landed on the ground. I met my match. Chapter 8. The astral world was one of the 72 divisions of the universe. It was so vast that it was beyond the imagination of a country bumpkin like Gunan. As the dividing line of the federal system, the 13 star fields of the astral realm formed a super federation, ruling over the tens of billions of people here. The red carp that Gunan was the main planet of the 9-star region. The ascending ship would drop him off when it passed by, and the local reception center would pick him up. Other than that, there was a lot of information about the astral world. Gunan could only choose the more important ones to read. The two most important ones were related to the red carp, and the other was about the power system of the astral world. It was different from the Langya world that he had traveled to. Although the astral world had an unimaginable level of technology, it was not a technological society. Instead, it was a place where the strong ruled. Everyone in the astral world practiced martial arts. Warriors and cultivators were divided into 5 big realms: acquired, innate, transcendent, breaking world, and Star Lord. Each realm could be divided into several small levels. With my current power level, I'm probably innate level 3. Cultivators' realms should be divided according to their internal breath level, but Gunan did not have internal breath, so he could only roughly estimate it according to his explosive power. There were only 6 levels in the innate realm. He was already in the middle, which was not bad. Time slipped away bit by bit as Gunan was reading. He only woke up abruptly when the entire resting cabin shook violently. He turned around and looked out the window. Colorful lights were moving quickly. The ascending ship seemed to be passing through the legendary space tunnel. But Gunan's mouth twitched, and a strange thought popped up in his head. Why does it look like a third-rate domestic cartoon? While Gunan was enjoying the strange scenery, the evil god's temple in his head suddenly shook, and a line of unprecedented text appeared. Detected that the player's body has arrived in another large instant space. Do you want to use it as the second base? Gunan was stunned. Another large instant space. Was it the astral world? According to the time and the scene outside the window, he should have passed through the gap between the 2 worlds and reached the outermost area of the astral world. If the astral realm was another large-scale instance dungeon, doesn't that mean that what I have experienced before is also an instance dungeon? The so-called myriad heavens and realms are actually instance dungeons? Gunan suddenly had a creepy feeling, as though there was a layer of fog that was difficult to see, shrouding everyone's eyes, and because of the evil divine palace, he was able to see the truth behind it. After subconsciously choosing yes, Gunan slowly calmed down. It was still too early to conclude that this was a conspiracy based on a single sentence from the evil god palace. The instance dungeons that he had experienced before were reset every time he entered them. Moreover, the judgment of the evil divine palace might not be correct, and it might not be the same as what he understood. Perhaps it was just assuming that all the dimensions were instance dungeons. Your destination, Red Carp of the 9-star region, is about to arrive. Please stand at the reception area. Without giving Gunan too much time to think, the announcement came again. A ring lit up in the room, which was the so-called reception area. Without thinking too much, Gunan went straight to the ring and was taken away from the ascension ship by the light pillar. However, the next moment, he felt that something was wrong. He was supposed to leave with the little lowly by Luoluo, but now there was another woman beside him. Qin Xuanji. Gunan suddenly felt his consciousness blur. Fourth brother. Who are these 2 little guys? They're just 2 innate realm cultivators, and yet they need 5 transcendents to kidnap them. One of them is a mission from the West, most likely a bloodkin. The other is the reincarnation karma of the girl care for one's family. So we can't kill these two people. We can't afford to offend the West and care for one's family. Once we are directly involved with the karma, the consequences will be unpredictable. Then what should we do? Leave them in the Bright Tower. It's best if they die, but even if they don't die, they will only come out after a few years. They won't be able to blame us. In a daze, Gunan gradually regained consciousness. Then he vaguely heard these voices, but his mind was still exhausted. Soon, it was covered by deep darkness. When he really woke up, he found himself in a small room. There were 2 beds here, and Qin Xuanji was lying next to him. The few words he heard when he was unconscious now clearly appeared in Gunan's mind. He knew very well that this was because his physique was far superior to ordinary people, and he did not enter a deep state of coma. Those people probably didn't expect that I would wake up early because my physique was too strong. Did they attack me because of Gunyan? Gunan sat up and thought calmly. I don't know if something happened to the little lowly, but I can't protect myself now. I'd better not think too much. Gunan began to look around. The layout was quite simple and old, but he could still see the modern atmosphere, which meant that he was not too far away from the red carp. He might even be on the red carp. What is the Bright Tower? With such doubts, Gunan got up and opened the door, but there was an empty grassland outside. There was not a single person. A subtle sound came from behind him. Gunan turned around and swept his fist without thinking. Suddenly, there was a muffled sound. It was Qin Xuanji who was thrown out. Gunan smiled silently. He had fought her hundreds of times in the challenge dungeon. He was very familiar with some of the small details of the other party. How could he be sneak attacked? But now is not the time for internal strife. Don't rush to fight. I was also brought from the Ascension ship. Do you remember? Qin Xuanji stood up indifferently. Her cold personality did not mean that she was stupid. After being reminded by Gunan, she immediately recalled the cause and effect. Gunan did not know how much she knew, but he thought that she would not tell him. Just when the 2 of them were speechless, a line of small words suddenly appeared from the ceiling and flashed quickly, entering the Bright Tower test plane in 2 breaths. 2 challengers, please be prepared. Gunan and Qin Xuanji looked at each other and frowned. It was a very random sentence, but the core message was revealed. The 2 of them were going to a special plane to complete a challenge. What challenge? Combat strength or other abilities? Cooperation or confrontation? Gunan thought more. Breaths was the standard unit of time in the astral world. It meant that ordinary people took a breath. 1 breath was equivalent to about 15 seconds. As expected, we are already in the astral world. His expression did not change, but he made a judgment in his heart. 2 breaths passed quickly. Gunan felt his vision go dark. When he reappeared, he was already in a completely different environment. Only Qin Xuanji was still standing beside him. At this moment, the evil god temple gave another notification that Gunan could not understand. Chapter 9. Yes. Receiving external quest. Data processing. New quest generated. Please check the quest list. Gunan was certain that there was no such notification in the game, nor were there any external quests. The only possibility was this test in the real world. He opened the quest list and saw the following words. Quest objective. Kill Han Yueran quest time limit. 1 hour quest reward. Medium the evil god's temple's quest rewards were never announced in advance. Instead, they were given based on the actual completion of the quest. However, the scale of the reward would be announced. A medium quest reward meant that this was a medium quest. But how could a medium quest be so simple? Gunan quickly looked around. This was an ancient-style quest, and the people around him were dressed in an ancient style. The ancient layout often meant that technology was not advanced enough, which meant that security was not tight enough. Assassination quests like this were much easier here than in a high-tech world. After being in this world for so long, Gunan had never received a medium quest. According to the rules of his previous life, a medium quest was not easy to complete. Normally, it would take at least 1 or 2 months. But now, the time limit was 1 hour? Ming Lu's reminder only arrived at this moment. A voice was transmitted directly into Gu Nan's ears. It was a slightly cold female voice. Please kill the Imperial Guard Commander Han Yueran within 1 hour. Han Yueran. Qin Xuanji clearly heard the voice transmission as she turned her head and whispered. Gunan nodded lightly in confirmation. Then, he paused and looked around meaningfully. There was a smile on his face that seemed to be mocking him. In a white room, a man and a woman were looking at a large screen. On the screen were Gu Nan and Qin Xuanji. Old Zhang, what do you think this kid is laughing at? The woman asked casually when she saw Gu Nan's movements. From the voice, she was the one who had transmitted the voice transmission to Gu Nan and Qin Xuanji. Old Zhang was not old at all. He was a tall and handsome man. He smiled and said, "He can't be laughing at us, right? He's probably laughing at the low difficulty of the mission. He looks like a veteran." The two of them had done countless assassination-type missions. Of course, they knew that this kind of environment was full of flaws. If they were experienced, it would be easy for them to find the entrance. It's not easy for our branch to have two newcomers. Of course, we have to choose the easiest assessment. The woman picked up an apple and nibbled on it. Let's hope we can pass it. If we look down on Ming Lu's quest just because we went easy, we'll die a horrible death. The mission to assassinate Han Yueran wasn't difficult at all. At least for an expert like Gu Nan, it wasn't even considered a small-scale mission in the game. There's no technical content at all. Gu Nan and Qin Xuanji quickly hid near the commander of the Imperial Guards, Han Yueran. Don't ask why it was so easy. After all, the words Imperial Guards, Han Residence, were hung on the door. They even wrote the words Imperial Guards. This is obviously free points. Gu Nan complained about the ease of the mission as he grinned from ear to ear at the free reward. Lower your voice. Qin Xuanji saw Gu Nan laughing foolishly at the side and couldn't help but scold him in a low voice. Different from the frivolous Xiao Gu, Qin Xuanji was the kind of person who took everything very seriously. For the sake of her identity as a bloodkin, she had suffered a lot. If she let her guard down even a little, she could die halfway. Gu Nan pouted in boredom. He felt like he was going out on a mission with an NPC. However, according to the usual pattern in the game, when an NPC was assisting the player, the NPC would often withdraw from the battle for some inexplicable reason. The player would still have to complete the battle alone. This is reality. There shouldn't be such a ridiculous thing. However, in the next moment, Qin Xuanji suddenly said, "Go." Her figure suddenly disappeared and went straight for Han Yueran. Only then did Gu Nan see clearly that Han Yueran was already alone. There were only a few ugly guards around him. There were no personal experts at all. "Hey!" Gu Nan cursed. Only now did he know that this woman had no intention of cooperating with him. Perhaps in her eyes, she could complete the mission herself, so why would she bring along a burden? Even if Gu Nan didn't intend to go at this time, forget it, it's better not to go. After thinking for a while, Gu Nan actually squatted back down. The two people in the clean white room covered their faces at the moment Qin Xuanji acted rashly, as if they couldn't bear to see what would happen next. Han Yueran was a young man with no facial hair. He looked very gentle, very unworthy of the awe-inspiring title of Commander of the Imperial Guards. Perhaps it was because of his appearance that when Qin Xuanji suddenly appeared, he was slightly stunned at first, but then he made an unexpected reaction. Han Yueran showed an expression that didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He took a step back unhurriedly and easily blocked Qin Xuanji's punch. Only then did the girl realize that something was wrong. She also realized that she was confused by the difficulty of the mission and neglected the most important thing, the strength of the assassination target. A mere martial king dares to assassinate me? Could it be that my name, Han Yueran, is no longer useful in the martial arts world? As he spoke disdainfully, Han Yueran quickly raised his leg and kicked Qin Xuanji's lower abdomen. The latter immediately groaned as her body involuntarily flew backwards. He's at least innate level 6, maybe even extraordinary realm. As expected, NPCs are really good at courting death, sending themselves to death when they go out. Gu Nan hid in the dark and watched as Qin Xuanji was taken away. He had no intention of attacking at all. In terms of attack, he was not much stronger than Qin Xuanji. He was only slightly stronger in endurance and speed, but he was still no match for Han Yueran. This little guy actually didn't attack. It's useless. Han Yueran is at the peak of Martial King, which is innate level 6. He can't hide his aura from him. It seems that removing all external obstacles has made them underestimate us. Old Zhang was a little annoyed. If he missed these two people, he didn't know when the branch would be able to replenish new blood. As if to prove old Zhang's words, after Han Yueran asked someone to take Qin Xuanji away, he stood there for a while and suddenly shouted, "Come out! How long are you going to hide?" It was calm, and no one paid attention to him. Gunan curled his lips. Did he think that he was that retarded woman, Qin Xuanji? How could he be so easily tricked? Han Yueran sneered. Indeed, he did not know where the other party was, but this was his Han mansion. Men, search every inch of this place for me. Gunan could not sit still anymore. He suddenly dashed out and shouted at the same time, "Han Yueran, do you really think we're here to assassinate you? To tell you the truth, this is just a delaying tactic. The palace has already succeeded by now, haha." Han Yueran's expression changed drastically, and he said angrily, "Bastard, how dare you attack the third prince?" Chapter 10. The test mission of assassinating Han Yueran could only be considered as one of the middle difficulty missions. Although Han Yueran was powerful, the mission also arranged many of his weaknesses. Some of these weaknesses were in the Han residence, some in the Imperial Army camp, and even in the Imperial Palace. The true difficulty of this mission was whether or not he could find enough weaknesses within the time limit to greatly weaken Han Yueran's power and make it possible to resist him. According to their calculations, with Gu Nan and Qin Xuanji's strength, as long as they found one weakness, they could easily complete the mission. Who would have thought that Qin Xuanji would be so honest that she would fall into his trap? And this Gu Nan's actions were so unexpected. Does he want to kill Han Yueran by himself with these methods? The girl named Tang Xin couldn't help but sneer. The difference between innate level 3 and innate level 6 wasn't that easy to make up. She knew very well that Gunan might not even hit his opponent once out of 10 arrows. What was the point? Old Zhang touched his chin and said, "Actually, it's not that there's no chance." He purposely provoked Han Yueran earlier because he had this intention. What intention? Kiting. Kiting was never a new tactic, but those who could use it in real life were few and far between because the conditions to achieve it were quite harsh. But Gunan did it. He used the blood of Han Yueran's 2 sons to provoke his opponent and used the crossbow to achieve supermobility. Then, he took away Han Yueran's life with one arrow after another. As time passed, the time limit for the mission was getting closer and closer, but Gu Nan's face didn't show the slightest anxiety. Han Yueran felt more and more tired. One of his eyes was already blind, and there was a black mark on his right knee. Other than the vital point, Gu Nan's arrows were most likely aimed at his knee. Being shot in the knee would not only be a setback, but it would also greatly affect his mobility. Han Yueran began to feel that the situation was changing. Previously, he chased his opponent all over the world, but now, his opponent would attack him from time to time, forcing him to be unable to stop. Was he really going to die here? Han Yueran also had the thought of running away, but the blood feud was right in front of him. His mother and friends were all behind him. How could he run? Once they escaped, it would be equivalent to the death of their entire family. Even if they managed to escape with their lives, what was the point? Standing amidst the ruins, Han Yueran suddenly felt that there was no place for him in this vast world. Whoosh! Another fire arrow shot over and slammed heavily into his chest. A terrifying explosion followed, and his entire body was flung away. This was the first time Han Yueran was unable to dodge an arrow and was directly hit. Gunan was instantly shocked. Quantitative change led to qualitative change. He knew that the critical point had finally been reached. Even if he couldn't hit his target with 10 arrows, what about after 100 or 200 arrows? People would always get tired, especially when their emotions were fluctuating so much that it consumed a lot of their physical strength. On the other hand, Gu Nan's movements were completely reliant on the hand crossbow, but he still maintained an abundance of stamina. The scales of victory were slowly tipping in his favor. In the small room, this arrow also became a turning point. Afterwards, under Tang Xian's astonished gaze, the situation had completely reversed in a one-sided manner. Gunan did not give his opponent any chance at all. He appeared particularly aggressive, and all 22 arrows hit their target in a row, blowing Han Yuan up into a sieve. Only then did Ol Zhang let out a sigh. However, a gratified smile appeared on his face. This little fellow is not bad. He's a good seedling. Bring them back. Tang Xian nodded blankly and activated the equipment to bring back the members. However, after a flash of white light, only Qin Xuanji appeared. Just like that, the three of them stared at each other in bewilderment. Why was Gunan not brought back? Main quest completed. Do you want to return immediately? The familiar voice rang out beside his ear. Gunan casually clicked no and continued with his massacre. In the small room, the scene of the dungeon was still playing. Gunan shot into the Han residence like a sharp arrow and killed the rest of the Han family members in a frenzy. From Han Yuan's 70-year-old mother to the little white dog of the outer courtyard maid. As long as he could move, he killed them all. Gunan only submitted the mission unhurriedly when the entire Han residence was bathed in a river of blood and there was not the slightest sign of life. Dungeon main quest completed. Main quest rating: C. Side quest development rate. D. Map exploration rate. C. Crime rate. B. Overall rating: C+. Accumulated points: 100 points. Accumulated sin points: 10 points. Return immediately. The next moment, Gunan's figure appeared in the small room. His expression was calm, but his heart was not calm at all. It was clearly only a C+ rating, and the difficulty of the mission was not high, but the accumulated points and sin points were far higher than normal. There was only one possibility, because this was an intermediate dungeon. 100 points and 10 sin points. This was the lowest requirement for an intermediate dungeon. No matter how low the difficulty was, the reward would not be lower than this. The logic in Gunan's mind gradually became clear. The Demon God game treated this world as a dungeon space, but there was a contradiction in one aspect. In the game, the level of the mission was determined by the difficulty of the mission, but in this world, it was determined by the level and size of the plane. In other words, as long as it was a medium-sized plane, regardless of the difficulty of the mission, it would be a medium reward. Gunan seemed to have seen a new path to riches. Just as Gunan looked at his 26 sin points and smiled foolishly, Old Zhang, Tang Xian, and Qin Xuanji looked at him with a strange expression. Old Zhang and Tang Xian did not suspect Gunan's delayed return. It was not the first time that the equipment had problems, but Gunan's behavior after that, cough. Old Zhang coughed and said, "Since you passed the test, then you are a family. Come over and get to know each other. Welcome to Minglu, Zhang Dongsheng. You can call me Old Zhang. Tang Xian, to be precise. This is Minglu's Red Carp's 6th asteroid belt." Old Zhang looked at her helplessly. He wanted to say something, but did not say it. Then, he introduced the situation of Minglu to the two of them. They already knew about Gunan and Tang Xian's information. As Old Zhang explained, Gunan and Qin Xuanji gradually understood what kind of environment they were in. Minglu was a huge organization that spanned across the entire astral world. Even the surrounding boundaries were influenced by Minglu. It was a super organization that had the ability to carry out cross-border missions. Chapter 11. Strictly speaking, only Zhang Dongsheng and Tang Xian were in charge of the Minluo branch that Gunan was in. The others were all ordinary members. There was no difference in rank, only the old and the new. From their strength, it could be seen that the two of them were transcendents, while the others were only innate. What's wrong? Zhang Dongsheng raised his eyebrows and looked at Tang Xian suspiciously. His philosophy was slightly different from Tang Xian's. He did not mind using underhanded means, so he was more optimistic about Gunan's performance. If not for his curiosity about the bloodline carrier, he would not have left Gunan with the other party. Tang Xian told him the results of Gunan's test with a gloomy face. Physique cultivator, gifted in both speed and recovery? It's a little strange. Zhang Dongxing's expression dimmed slightly, as if he was a little regretful. I'll go to the higher-ups database to see if there are any suitable techniques for him. Seeing that he still had high hopes for Gunan, Tang Xian's expression darkened even more. Forget about the cultivation route. Didn't you see his performance? He's a complete prick. Zhang Dongsheng was amused. He pointed at her and said, "You still say he's a prick? You weren't any better when you first entered the organization, right?" Tang Xian blushed and coughed lightly. "How is that the same? I was deliberately put in a difficult position, but he was clearly the one who started it. All right, no matter what, as long as he's still a member of the organization and can complete the mission, it's fine. Why worry about his personality?" That's true. The organization does not allow members to kill each other, not with love to influence them. If they really dare to violate the rules, the Karma's secret technique will let them know the consequences. Gunan sat alone in the room without a trace of light. He just quietly stayed in the darkness. It's indeed easier to get missions by deliberately causing trouble. The next time I reincarnate into another realm, if I can still receive evil god missions, I'm afraid the evil god temple will really accept external missions like this. Then, as long as I keep looking for easy missions from middle-level realms, won't I be able to farm sin points easily? Every professional player was passionate about finding game bugs and using them for their own benefit. As long as his account was not banned, this was probably the least of Gunan's worries. Dong dong. There was a soft knock on the door. Gunan's unlocked door was knocked open a crack. "Gunan?" Qin Xuanji's voice came from the door. "What's up?" Gunan casually tossed the book over and hit the switch. The chandelier on the ceiling lit up, and the room instantly brightened up. Qin Xuanji's expression was still cold and calm, but there was a rare trace of restraint. She hesitated for a moment and said, "It's all your credit that I can pass the assessment mission. I want to thank you." "Oh, there's no need to thank me. Just repay me when you have the chance. Is there anything else?" The atmosphere suddenly became awkward. Qin Xuanji felt that what she wanted to say had been said by the other party. Qin Xuanji was a very serious person. After failing in the test, she kept reflecting on herself. She felt that it might be because she had successfully become a bloodkin that she had let down her guard. Otherwise, with her strength, even if she faced Han Yueran head-on, she might not necessarily have no chance of winning. It was also because of this that she was particularly curious about Gu Nan, who could defeat Han Yueran with the strength of innate level 3. She was so curious that she tried to understand his every move. She thought for a moment and asked, "There's something I've always wanted to ask you. In the assessment mission, why did you kill Han Yueran's entire family? Is this also related to the mission?" "It has nothing to do with the mission." Gu Nan smiled. "It's just that I promised Han Yueran before that I would kill his entire family. As a person, of course, I have to keep my word." He also wanted to get more sin points. Unfortunately, the mission difficulty was too low. Killing his entire family was useless. Qin Xuanji thought for a long time and nodded seriously. "You're right. Since I promised him, I naturally have to do what I can. I'm looking forward to the next mission with you." The corner of Qin Xuanji's mouth slightly rose. She seemed to want to show a smile, but failed. "Me too." Gunan laughed heartily. 7 days passed by quickly. Gunan adjusted his condition, but he still did not know much about the astral world. The Minglu was a very strange organization. On one hand, it strictly forbade members from killing each other. On the other hand, it was very inhumane. It seemed like they only wanted to train their members to be mission machines. Other than mission and battle-related information, they were not allowed to touch any other information. What kind of organization is this? They don't care about their background and only need their members to complete the mission? Gunan could not guess the intentions of the Ming Lu, but this did not affect him from completing the mission. As long as he could provide him with points and sin points, he did not care about the Ming Lu or the Ming Lu. The Sky Blue City that we are going to this time is a very difficult mission. The organization has already lost 3 waves of people, so we must not let our guard down. In the bar's hall, Yi Chong was distributing the mission information. His tone was very serious. "This time, it's our branch's turn to send people. There are still 2 newbies, so we just have to do our best. At most, we will retreat early. I think old Zhang is thinking the same. Lin Ruo did not take the information. She already knew this mission like the back of her hand. If the mission could not be completed, the organization was allowed to retreat. In principle, they did not encourage people to fight to the death. Everyone was aware of the difficulty of the Sky Blue City mission. Even the big divisions on the administrative planets were powerless. How could they hope for a small place like theirs on the planet belt? In response to Lin Ruo's words, Yicheng only remained silent. He did not refute her. Clearly, he had such thoughts in mind. This was the first time that Gunan and Qin Xuanji were learning about the mission. They looked at the information very seriously. The more Qin Xuanji read, the more her brows furrowed. On the other hand, Gunan was expressionless. The Sky Blue City mission could be said to be easy, but it could also be said to be very difficult. The mission objective was very clear. They just had to protect one thing from being stolen by the enemy for 3 days. The difficult part was that the reincarnators had almost no time to prepare. They had to prepare for battle the moment they woke up. On the other hand, the enemy was well prepared. This was a contest of raw strength, and there was almost no room for tricks. Lin Ruo's gaze was fixed on Gunan. It was not only because of the conflict earlier, but also because of what Tang Xian had said to her in private. Gunan is a newbie. He likes to use tricks in missions. This mission can teach him a lesson. Thinking of Tang Xian's words, Lin Ruo could not help but sneer. Of course, Gunan could not read Lin Ruo's smile. He threw the information aside and asked, "When do we set off?" "In 17 minutes and 35 seconds. The flow of time in the small dimension is different from here. We have to reincarnate at the right time," Yicheng replied. Then, he looked at him suspiciously. "You finished reading so quickly?" There was a lot of information on the Sky Blue City mission. Gunan flipped through it twice and put it aside. Could he understand it just like that? "Yes, it's just a small mission. It's not that difficult." Gunan waved his hand. This arrogant newbie. The sneer on Lin Ruo's face deepened. Even Yicheng could not help but shake his head. Actually, they did not know that Gunan was just telling the truth. Based on his years of experience in major dungeons, this was indeed just child's play. Chapter 12. I don't care what you think of the mission. Have you memorized the rules of reincarnation? 2 minutes before departure, Yicheng was still seriously instructing the two newbies. Zhang Dongsheng seemed to have appointed him as the person in charge, and he needed to be responsible for the results of this mission. Qin Xuanji nodded seriously and said nothing. Gunan also nodded seriously and yawned. Yicheng's face was a little dark. He shouted at Gunan, "Gunan, remember, even if the mission completely fails, you are not allowed to violate any of the rules of reincarnation. Do you understand?" "Understood." Gunan still looked weak. Yicheng shook his head. In fact, it was not that Gunan was deliberately looking for trouble, but he really could not take it seriously. The so-called rules of reincarnation were what they had been asked to understand, or at least memorize for the past 7 days. It described all kinds of taboos during reincarnation. For example, one must use one's real name for reincarnation, and the reincarnator must not leave karma in the reincarnation plane. This was not the first time Gunan heard the word karma. He came to the astral realm because Gunyin wanted to end his karma. He was kidnapped and sent to the Bright Tower because someone did not want Gunyin to end his karma. Those people did not dare to kill him because they were afraid of being tainted by the karma. If the karma was not ended, the cultivator would be haunted by inner demons when he advanced to the next realm, causing him to die on the spot. "I'd be a fool to believe you." Gunan was disdainful. If the power of karma affected the cultivator through inner demons, then why was there no karma in the original plane, but only during reincarnation? Clearly, karma was related to reincarnation. The time for reincarnation arrived quickly. As a blue light flashed on the round table in the center of the tavern, the spirits of the four were pulled out and thrown into the other end of the endless void, into a broken small plane. In the early morning, the crisp sound of birds echoed in the mountains. At the foot of the mountain, there was a dilapidated orphanage. For young men and women gradually woke up. It was Gunan and the other three. 2 boys and 2 girls. They were orphans adopted by the director of the orphanage 16 years ago. They grew up together. The orphanage's director, Madame Luo Bing, was the main character of this mission. The ice soul crystal in her bloodline was what the enemies were after. Yichong got up the moment he opened his eyes and looked around. Seeing that his companions had woken up as well, he spoke as if it was a matter of course. The first wave of attack will come in a quarter of an hour. Make some simple defenses here or find a suitable weapon to eliminate the vanguard and buy time. Lin Ruo continued. We've reincarnated with our souls, so the recovery of our powers is very fast. However, it will still take about half a day. During this period, you must be careful of your own safety. Reincarnating with one's divine soul would allow one's strength to recover extremely quickly. However, if one died during the reincarnation, their divine soul would also suffer heavy damage, and they might even die directly. Therefore, when dealing with this kind of mission, the members of the Tower of Light would choose to give up on the mission if they felt that they could not handle it. Lin Ruo's words were clearly directed at the two newcomers. Although she had some conflicts with Gunan, now was not the time to deal with personal conflicts. Qin Xuanji's expression was solemn as she meticulously searched for a weapon. Before one's physical strength recovered, the impact of a weapon was still very great. On the other hand, Gunan's expression was relaxed. However, he also began to search around. This made Yichong and Lin Ruo heave a sigh of relief. They were afraid that Gunan would still not take this seriously and drag everyone down with him. However, when he returned, the two of them could not laugh anymore. Qin Xuanji had at least found a hatchet, but Gunan had actually found a bottle? Why are you looking for a bottle? The enemies are coming soon. We have to rely on our current bodies to fight against more than 10 postnatal realm opponents. Lin Ruo roared at Gunan. She felt like she was about to go crazy. She hated this kind of guy who was still sloppy when he was doing something serious. They deserved to die. Yet, they had to drag their companions down. Who said we have to fight? You NPCs know nothing about dungeons. Gunan curled his lips in disdain. He then said to Qin Xuanji, lend me your knife. Oh, Gunan held the hatchet in one hand and the empty bottle in the other as he walked into the house. Coincidentally, the mission target, Lady Luo Bing, walked out of the house. Yichong quickly went up to her and said anxiously, Godmother, get ready. Young Master Blue Sky's men are coming. As an orphan adopted by Luo Bing, the four of them had always addressed her as Godmother. When Luo Bing heard the words Young Master Blue Sky, her entire body trembled. Her face turned pale. Sanair, how did you know? Forget it, they're coming for me. You guys leave quickly, the further the better. Of course, Yichong could not say that he knew this from the previous missions. He turned to look at Lin Ruo. According to his previous experience, he needed at least one person to cooperate with him in persuading Luo Bing. At least two people were needed to persuade her. As long as he could persuade her and the other two to escape first, leaving the other two to guard the rear, it would be much easier. Lin Ruo already knew the procedure. She walked up and gently hugged Luo Bing's arm. She said softly, Godmother, you know that we grew up with you. If anything happens to you, sob. Lin Ruo's lovely appearance immediately moved Luo Bing, and the latter's expression softened. Yichong could not help but praise her in his mind. No matter how cold and arrogant Lin Ruo was usually, she was very competent when it came to missions. She acted like a little girl without any shyness. However, just as the two of them were slightly relieved, a black light flashed, and they felt something warm splashing on their faces. Blood. Luo Bing's blood. That Gunan had actually slashed Luo Bing's neck. Yichong felt blood rush to his head. His great plan had been ruined. Do you know what you're doing? You. He glared angrily as he charged over and grabbed Gunan's collar, speaking furiously. However, Gunan pushed him away. Move aside, don't get in my way. Yichong was so angry that he could not speak. Qin Xuanji was the only one who continued to stare at Gunan. After learning from old Zhang how Gunan passed the test, she became very interested in this life. She really wanted to know how he was going to complete this Sky Blue City mission. Gunan squatted down and placed a bottle on the wound on Luo Bing's neck to catch the blood that flowed out. Luo Bing was not completely dead yet. She stared at Gunan with her eyes wide open. She could not understand why the family she had relied on for 16 years would attack her. Why? Gunan looked at her. Because he needed to draw blood, it was not convenient to break her neck. Therefore, he spoke seriously. This is to protect your ice spirit bloodline. Since you're going to die anyway, why not let us take your blood? At least we won't let young Master Sky Blue get what he wants, right? Chapter 13. On the other side, young Master Sky Blue, Elder Sue, and the rest followed Gunan's footsteps and arrived at the estuary. Damn it, these bastards deserve to die 1,000 times. Young Master Sky Blue's face was contorted. He knew what had happened even without Elder Sue's explanation. A pool of light blue liquid floated on the surface of the raging sea. How dare they pour the ice soul blood into the sea? If Gunan was present at this moment, the young master of Blue Sky would definitely not hesitate to cut him into pieces with his own hands to vent the hatred in his heart. Did these bastards know how precious the ice soul blood meridian was? How dare they pour it into the sea? Elder Sue could no longer care about the pain in his heart. He ran to the estuary with a dark expression and waved his sleeve. A ray of light instantly enveloped the blue light. There were many paths of cultivation in the world. This Elder Sue was obviously one who specialized in telekinesis. He used his spiritual energy to envelop the remaining blood, ensuring that it would not leak out. Only then did he dare to slowly extract it. The blood has been completely washed away, leaving behind only the pure ice soul force. Elder Sue sighed softly. Fortunately, Luo Bing's blood was concentrated enough. Otherwise, it would have been washed away by the sea. Young Master Sky Blue could not help but ask, "Is there any way to extract the blood?" "Of course," Elder Sue said proudly. "Those people went for wool and came home shorn. They did not expect us to arrive so quickly. They also did not expect that the ice soul blood meridian was neither weak nor strong. It was not washed away by the sea. I have preserved it with a secret technique. As long as we hurry and purify it, the ice soul blood meridian will still be complete without being contaminated by the sea." Hearing this, young Master Sky Blue was relieved. He nodded and said, "We only need about 80% of the blood. That will be enough. Elder Sue, please do it as soon as possible." With every second that passed, the blood would be contaminated a little. Elder Sue did not dare to delay. He hurriedly sat down and used his spiritual energy to refine the seawater. Time ticked by. The young Master of Sky Blue was no longer in a hurry. After all, he had already obtained the bloodline. All he did was order his subordinates to guard the area. After a few hours, Elder Sue slowly opened his eyes. His face was filled with unconcealable exhaustion. However, he was very excited. "Young Master, the Ice Soul bloodline has been completely purified. Why is there so little? Shameless thief. Not all of them fell in." Gunan and the others were walking in the mountains, each of them holding a large pile of frozen meat in their hands. The Ice Soul bloodline was indeed extraordinary. After leaving the body, it only took a small bite of the bloodline to freeze the poor little wild boar into an ice sculpture. Gunan chopped the frozen pig into pieces and distributed some to everyone so that they could throw it away as they walked. "What's the purpose of doing this?" Qin Xuanji asked curiously. She was also a person who often walked in the wild, but she couldn't understand Gunan's actions. Gunan casually tossed a piece of meat and explained, "To interfere with the pursuit. Normally, using the power of the bloodline to determine the location wouldn't be as accurate as technological methods. At most, it would be a vague feeling. Before he could finish, Lin Ruo couldn't help but interject, so the distance or the energy is weak, the opponent would have a similar feeling, and the opponent wouldn't be able to tell. That's very likely." Gunan nodded. Lin Ruo and Yi Chong looked at each other. After thinking about it, it seemed to make sense. Some of the tracking methods they usually used also had this flaw. However, with their train of thought, they had never thought of it this way. They had no way of exploiting this blind spot in their thinking. The truth seemed to be as Gunan had thought. When they were almost at the edge of the forest, there was a commotion behind them. It was obvious that the opponent had launched a large-scale search. The young master of sky blue breathed heavily through his nostrils. He stood on the spot and ordered his subordinates to search around. He held a piece of frozen pork in his hand. These petty tricks again. The young master of sky blue snorted coldly, secretly cursing in his heart. He had thought that with their speed and with Elder Sue's help, they would be able to catch up to the opponent in no time. However, the opponent had used such tricks to delay them time and time again. Elder Sue's face was dark as well. Even a few strands of his hair had turned white from anger. Originally, the power of the bloodline had pointed them in this direction. However, when he actually arrived, he realized that the bloodline had suddenly pointed them in dozens of different directions. From the moment he saw the frozen pork, he knew what the opponent had done. However, he had no idea how to deal with it. The dozens of senses were all different in strength. The correct answer was hidden in a bunch of illusions. How was he supposed to tell? Cunning bastard. What was even more surprising was yet to come. Yi Chong and the other two followed Gunan. Just like that, they wandered around the forest and the mountains for 3 days. However, they did not encounter a single enemy attack. Gunan had too many tricks up his sleeves. Things like confusion, creating roadblocks, diverting the enemy's attention. Anything that could be used in the forest was played to perfection by him. When there was no other way, he would capture a dozen wild beasts and force them to drink a mouthful of frost soul blood. Gunan and the others just left. Poor Elder Sue had to work himself to death to purify the bloodline from the beast's blood. After 3 days, Gunan and the others rested and rested. Instead, it was the pursuers who were exhausted. They did not have a good night's sleep for 3 days and 3 nights. After the frost soul blood left the body, its spirituality would continue to fade. After 3 days, it would completely lose its effect. No one dared to rest. Young master, we've already surrounded them in the valley ahead. They can't escape. A man in black stood in front of the young master of sky blue and said in a low voice. His eyes were bloodshot and his image was terrible. If it was the young master of sky blue who usually paid attention to his manners, he would have kicked him. However, he was not in the mood now. On one hand, he was not much better. On the other hand, it was because finally, we've caught them. The dignified young master of sky blue had the urge to cry tears of joy. He grabbed Elder Sue's arm and said, Elder Sue, hold on a little longer. We're almost done. Elder Sue nodded vigorously, but he did not even have the strength to speak. He no longer looked like a human. His eyes were bloodshot and there were bloodstains on his face. His hair was white and he was pushed on a simple wheelchair. The young master of sky blue felt his heart ache when he saw him in this state. This elder who had watched him grow up was the one who had been working the hardest for the past 3 days. On one hand, he had to sense the enemy's location at all times. On the other hand, he had to purify the frost soul blood from all sorts of places. He did not even have time to rest. After 3 days and 3 nights, even a man of steel would not be able to take it. Charge! Charge him with me! The group rushed to the entrance of the valley, and the young master of sky blue shouted impatiently. He no longer cared about probing or the enemy's strength. All he wanted now was to fight to his heart's content. Even if he died in battle, it would be much better than the 3 days of suffocation he had to endure. Of course, the young master was still very confident in his decision. According to the information he received, the enemy was just 4 orphans raised by Luo Bing. They did not have any extraordinary abilities. They were just a little smart. How could they be a match for him? Chapter 14. In the Evil God game, players could use a total of 3 types of equipment: weapons, armor, and accessories. Among them, weapons and armor could only be equipped once, but accessories could be earrings, necklaces, and face accessories. That was why Gu Nan chose the second option to open the accessory column. Of course, although accessories could be equipped in large quantities, they still needed to be purchased with points. For example, Gunan only had enough points to buy 2 at the moment. If it weren't for the lack of money, he would have opened the accessory column first. The two accessories that Gu Nan had bought were the best ones that he had carefully selected. The observer's eyepiece was a monocle that was worn on the right eye. It was equivalent to having the passive insight skill. When looking at people or objects, it could obtain high-precision data analysis. The shadow earring was even more amazing. It was a legendary skill equipment that could directly increase the level of a skill. Before reaching grade 3 and learning skills, this kind of equipment was simply a divine artifact, allowing players to learn skills in advance. After wearing this earring, Gu Nen had the equivalent of level 1 shadow power. He had the ability to manipulate shadows at a subtle level and could use the hidden shadow skill. When his consciousness returned to reality, Gu Nen put on the eyepiece and the earring, and his entire temperament suddenly changed. In the full-length mirror that was as tall as a person, Gu Nen wore a monocle on his left eye and a dark gold earring on his right ear. Coupled with his calm and indifferent gaze, his temperament seemed cold and evil. Gu Nen knew very well that this was because of the shadow earring, which leaked a trace of shadow power, which made him look a little gloomy. With a slight thought, the shadow earring vibrated slightly, and an inexplicable wave rose from his body. A shadow grew from under Gu Nan's feet and slowly extended forward until it was nearly 20 meters in front of him. It suddenly turned into a sharp blade and stabbed from the ground. I haven't used shadow manipulation for a long time. I'm really not used to it. Gu Nan muttered, but he was still quite satisfied. After all, it was only at this subtle level of shadow control. It was already not bad to be able to use this skill that players jokingly called shadow killing. The next moment, the shadow quickly returned to under Gu Nan's feet, and he suddenly disappeared, turning into a black shadow that lurked on the ground. The core skill of the evil god of agility, hidden shadow. Compared to other types of evil gods, the evil god of agility did not have powerful strength, abundant life force, nor did it have the ever-changing psychic ability. What it did have was the most unpredictable skill system in the game. If the evil god of agility walked the path of shadows, it would be a natural assassin. With hidden shadow and shadow manipulation, Gu Nan was completely fearless even if he were to face a 5th-level innate realm expert. Moreover, after opening a new equipment slot, my strength seems to have increased again. It's time to test it out, Gu Nan muttered to himself as he felt the abundant strength within his body. From the corner of the room, he found an old-looking helmet and gently put it on his head. This was the login device for the Ming Lu's internal virtual combat arena. The astral realm was a half-technological plane, and it had long had virtual combat technology. However, compared to Gu Nan's previous life, it was rather underdeveloped. The astral world was a semi-technological plane. Virtual combat technology had long existed, but compared to Gu Nan's previous life, it was rather underdeveloped. The reason was simple. On the one hand, the technology here was focused on military use, and the precision of virtual technology was lacking. On the other hand, the higher-ups didn't cooperate. Which famous master would be willing to be scanned like this? It was the same as exposing all their trump cards and waiting for others to come looking for trouble. Therefore, those who were willing to enter the public virtual combat arena were basically acquired stage martial artists or even martial arts enthusiasts. Innate stage martial artists like Gu Nan would only go to some private servers. For example, the Tower of Ming Tower's own combat arena was called the Tower of Ming Tower Combat Arena. There were many innate stage martial artists inside, and occasionally extraordinary masters. In any case, the organization had already gotten hold of their body data. Apart from some who had other secrets, the others didn't really care. The interface of the Tower of Ming Tower Combat Arena was very simple. It was almost the same as the pixel games from hundreds of years ago in Gu Nan's previous life, with rough text and rough lines. Gu Nan's information was also very simple. There was only a name and the fact that he came from Red Carp's 6th Asteroid Belt Division. There wasn't even a level of strength shown. Starting matching, there were quite a few people who used the combat arena in the Tower of Ming Tower. In just a few seconds, Gu Nan was matched with an opponent. It was a young man in black tights, the typical attire of someone from the Tower of Ming Tower. The information said, 66 Amaterasu Headquarters, Qin Chonghua. When a young man saw Gu Nan's information, he almost laughed out loud. Asteroid Belt Division? What kind of rural place is this? The organization actually has a division in the asteroid belt. 66 Amaterasu was also located in the Ninth Star sector. Although it wasn't the main planet, it was one of the 3 administrative planets. Its status was second only to Red Carp. Moreover, this young man came from the headquarters of an administrative planet. Of course, he wouldn't be interested in a division in the asteroid belt. For a division like this, it was rare to even see a few living people, let alone expect to receive many resources from the organization. How strong could the members be? Although Qin Chonghua was only at the 4th level of the innate stage, he had mastered many high-end martial arts techniques. He was very confident. Kid, make your move. Don't say that I didn't give you a chance. Qin Chonghua stood in the arena and looked at Gu Nan with a faint smile. Okay. Gu Nan nodded. Then, his figure suddenly dashed out like a sharp arrow. In the blink of an eye, he was in front of his opponent. So fast. Why is he so fast? Qin Chonghua's eyes widened, but his body couldn't keep up with his movements at all. Bang! Gu Nan's fist smashed into his face and directly sent Qin Chonghua flying. The terrifying power even caused a sonic boom. The super high attack speed of an agility-type evil god was not to be trifled with. Qin Chonghua's face landed on the ground. With great difficulty, he got up. There was a big bump on his face. But before he could say anything, Gu Nan rushed up again. Qin Chonghua quickly realized that he had made a big mistake. He didn't have the qualifications to be arrogant. Even if his opponent fought with him head-on, he wouldn't be the slightest bit inferior, not to mention that he had the absolute advantage. This person didn't seem to know martial arts at all, but his attack speed was too fast, and his movements were too clean and neat. He didn't give his opponent any chance to use martial arts at all. Qin Chonghua wanted to cry, but had no tears. He had never seen such a martial artist before. In a short 2 minutes, because Qin Chonghua's hands were weak, he was punched in the throat by Gu Nan. Because his laryngeal bone was directly shattered, the system determined that he was dead and sent out. A solid 4th-level congenital realm expert was blasted to death just like that by Gu Nan's attacks that were like a violent storm. Chapter 15. After a few more rounds of fighting, Gu Nan finally confirmed his own strength. In terms of pure strength and explosive power, he was probably between innate level 4 and level 5. However, his physical fitness was extremely strong, and he could even withstand attacks from opponents of the same level. His true combat power was far from that. Moreover, Gu Nan still had 3 pieces of equipment. Once he used the 4 elements crossbow and shadow power, even innate level 6 experts would not be a problem. My strength has been confirmed. Unfortunately, according to the rules of the Ming Lu, I don't know how long it will take before I have the chance to leave. Gu Nan did not forget that it was because of Gun Yinji that he had been kidnapped and brought to the Ming Lu. If he had the chance, he would definitely leave this place and meet up with Gun Yan. At the same time, he would also find out who was behind this. Although it was important to increase his strength, he had to take revenge. Who knows, he might even be able to get away with committing a crime. However, they had thrown him to this division in the asteroid belt to delay him and prevent him from appearing in a short period of time. According to the rules of the Ming Lu, 5 missions made up a round. Only after completing a round of missions would he be allowed to leave. After leaving the Ming Lu, even if he temporarily left his status as a Ming Lu member, if he wanted to return to complete a mission, he would still have to complete a round of missions before he was allowed to leave. This strange rule was the source of the Ming Lu's mysteriousness. All official members were on missions, and those outside were definitely not official members. At most, they were former members. The people who kidnapped Gu Nan had said that he would have to stay here for at least a few years, and they were not wrong. For these warriors, the missions of the Ming Lu were still very difficult. Newcomers needed a lot of time to train and improve. To complete 5 missions, it would take at least 2 to 3 years. In particular, they had purposely sent Gu Nan to the asteroid belt to limit his growth to the greatest extent. For some of the bigger divisions, the Ming Lu would have resources allocated to them. However, a rural division like the asteroid belt could not even complete the normal missions, let alone talk about resources. However, no one had expected that there would be a freak like Gu-nan whose strength had skyrocketed. Even Gu-nan had to thank them. If he hadn't been brought to the Tower of Light, Gu-nan wouldn't have had the chance to increase his strength by leaps and bounds. The evil god game itself wouldn't have allowed him to complete quests so quickly. According to the frequency at which he first arrived in this world, there was an average of one small-sized mission every week. Moreover, the difficulty was low and the rewards were poor. Unlike Ming Lu, who could manually import external missions. What did you say? You want to accept a new mission? Zhang Dongsheng and Tang Xian frowned at the same time as they looked at the calm Gu-nan. Zhang Dongsheng tried to persuade him with kind words. Gu-nan, I know that you are very confident in completing the mission, but our small division is only a small one. No matter how hard we try, we won't be able to complete the quota, and we won't get any rewards either. Why bother? Every Ming Lu branch had a fixed quota of missions and resources. Those who completed more would be rewarded, while those who completed less would have their resources deducted. A division like the one in the asteroid belt was poor to begin with. The headquarters would not embezzle too much from them, so they might as well go all out. Of course, Gu-nan wouldn't say that they were doing missions with no benefits and that they were giving him the path to leveling up. He said righteously, since the organization has decided to let me be a member of Ming Lu, then please allow me to recite a poem. Zhang Dongsheng and Tang Xian looked at each other. In the end, they couldn't persuade Gu-nan and could only let him be. Tang Xian said with a serious face, I heard that you killed Luo Bing the moment you entered the Sky Blue City mission. Don't do that in the future. Why? Did you seriously read the reincarnation manual? Tang Xian said angrily. The reincarnated person inherits the karma. Luo Bing is the reincarnated person's closest relative. How could you kill her? You were lucky this time. The karma didn't add to your body. Are you going to count on good luck next time? The theory of karma was very mysterious. Even the people in Ming Lu, who relied on reincarnation to make a living, couldn't say that they completely understood it. Logically speaking, when Gu-nan killed Luo Bing, he had completely violated the karma of the reincarnated person. However, the karma didn't entangle him in the end. There was probably some unknown rule at work. However, this didn't mean that Gu-nan could do whatever he wanted. At least, Tang Xian wouldn't allow it. However, Gu-nan just waved his hand nonchalantly, which made Tang Xian angry. Since you want to participate in missions so much, I have an organization collaboration mission here. Are you willing to accept it? Tang Xian stared at Gu-nan. Of course. Gu-nan answered without hesitation. But what's the collaboration mission? Zhang Dongsheng explained. Other than normal missions, there are some large-scale missions. The content is very complicated and requires the cooperation of many people from different divisions. I'll accept it. I'll definitely accept this mission. Before Zhang Dongsheng could finish, Gu-nan said excitedly, what kind of collaboration mission was this? This was basically a multiplayer dungeon in the game. A multiplayer dungeon had to be at least medium-sized or above. Moreover, it had a special characteristic. There were a lot of side missions and a mechanism to settle the side rewards in advance. Team dungeons were dungeons that required multiple players to work together or fight against each other in order to complete certain objectives. In the game in his previous life, multiplayer dungeons were rare. They could even be said to be precious because they could bring huge benefits to the players and were not easy to open. This kind of dungeon would not appear normally and could only be opened with a dungeon scroll. The main mission of a multiplayer dungeon was generally very complicated and took a long time to complete. Therefore, players could improve themselves by completing side missions. And now, a multiplayer dungeon was placed in front of Gu-nan. How could he refuse? Seeing that he agreed, Tang Xian couldn't help but snort. If you want to participate in the mission, you have to listen to orders. A collaboration mission is not a joke. You can't do it on your own. Gu-nan nodded repeatedly. I promise to listen to orders. If I don't listen, you can come and hit me? What did you say? I said if I don't listen to orders, go ahead and kill me. A few days later, Gunan had read a lot of information about the dungeon and the content related to the mission. Finally, he began his journey to another dungeon. External mission detected. Accept? Yes, the dungeon is named Immortal Demon World. Following Gunan's order, the evil god's temple instantly entered the mission program into the list. As Gunan's soul was slowly pulled out, he also slowly approached the world in the endless void. Unlike the Sky Blue City mission, the pulling process this time was very slow and seemed to be very laborious. This gave Gunan time to look at the endless void and the worlds within it. He saw the astral realm, the Sky Blue City dimension that he had been to before, and the Immortal Demon World that he was about to go to. The Immortal Demon World was very large. If the astral realm was the size of Earth, then the Immortal Demon World was the size of the moon. As for the Sky Blue City dimension, it was not even the size of a basketball. Chapter 16. Gunan slowly turned around. Standing in front of him were two young girls. One of them was a young girl in white who reached his chest. Oh, she should be a Lolita in white. The other one was a head taller than him. She wore a purple robe and had short hair. It was said that behind every main character stood a pure and beautiful Lolita. When everyone despised the main character, she would always bam. The Lolita threw a punch at Gunan, but he casually caught it. How did you become so powerful? The Lolita looked at him in surprise. The Lolita's name was Yin Xiaoxiao. She was a rather famous daughter of an aristocratic family in Zhejiang City. Naturally, she knew of Gunan's reputation. She had seen the scene where Gunan had sent the guards flying. She could not help but want to try it out, but she did not expect that Gunan would casually catch it. Gunan squinted his eyes, a dangerous glint flashing in his eyes. She knew Gunan, but Gunan did not know her. To someone who dared to attack him, Gunan, suddenly being called by his real name, Gunan's movement stopped. He then shifted his gaze to the short-haired Lolita. The face of a reincarnated person was, of course, different from the original body. But just like how one's physical strength would quickly recover, their appearance and figure would also be affected by the soul, gradually becoming similar to the original body. Under careful observation, Gunan easily recognized her. Emo Jiechi, one of his companions from the 6th asteroid belt. She was a rare practitioner of telekinesis. She had a name and ability that was incompatible with this world of immortals and demons. When she saw Gunan, Emo Jiechi actually heaved a sigh of relief. She had spent most of her time on this mission. She did not know much about Gunan and only treated him as an ordinary newcomer. So when she heard that the guide had been robbed and killed, she thought that something bad was about to happen. Luckily, this newcomer seemed to be more alert than she had imagined. Let's settle our karma first. Gunan nodded. Since this little loli was with Emo Jiechi, it would not be easy to kill her. However, Gunan smiled strangely at Yin Xiaoxiao. Yin Xiaoxiao got goosebumps from his laughter. She looked at her cousin, not understanding what they were doing. Soon, people from Care for One's family appeared. A group of people came over in a mighty manner. The leader said, Gu Sheng, how dare you come back to Care for One's family? Did you ignore the words of the master? This was the brother-in-law of Gunan's predecessor. Gunan couldn't remember his name. He only remembered that he was a person who didn't treat his predecessor very well. Yes, we can. Gunan nodded inwardly. However, since Emo Jiechi was here, he still had to go through the necessary procedures. Originally, he had planned to kill them all and be done with it. From today onwards, call me Gunan. Gunan took a step forward and said in a loud voice. He took out a piece of white paper out of nowhere. The paper was densely filled with words. It was a declaration of war. Zhejiang Care for One's family disregards morality and acts tyrannically. They bully me, Gunan, because I am young and powerless. They forced my mother to kill and chased me out of the family. Fortunately, I was blessed by the gods and was able to cultivate immortal techniques. Today, we will kill all 104 members of Care for One's family to settle our karma. This long declaration, of course, was not written by Gunan. It was prepared for him by Tang Xian in advance. Reincarnators had long discovered that if they announced that they had settled their karma, through means that corresponded to the world's background, the effect would be better than just doing it without saying anything. In other words, the karma god also likes to listen to reports. Gunan silently mocked. Hearing this, Gunan's uncle's face instantly turned pale. Even the little lowly, Yin Xiao, could not help but look at Gunan in shock. You actually became a celestial bestow? All righteous reincarnators came from Ming Lu. Many people had said similar things, so there were already legends about them in the righteous camp. They were even called celestial bestowers. The so-called celestial bestowers were people who had received teachings from immortals. Reincarnators usually grew at an unbelievable speed. In the eyes of ordinary people, other than receiving teachings from immortals, there was no other explanation. Little Uncle forced himself to calm down and said, "Man, don't think that you can do whatever you want just because you've become a celestial bestower. My Zhejiang care for one's family is under the protection of the righteous Five-Sect Alliance." The so-called Five-Sect Alliance was mostly infiltrated by Ming Lu's power. They might be fair when dealing with the natives, but when it came to reincarnators, fairness was a joke. "Don't come over. You." Gunan casually threw the declaration to the side and looked at him in confusion. "When did I walk over there?" The next moment a red light lit up. Fire. A fiery red arrow flew out and directly caused an explosion in the crowd. Blood and mincemeat flew everywhere. A severed hand flew out and landed right next to Yin Xiao's feet. The little lowly in white had never seen such a scene before and screamed on the spot. Even Emo Jiechi was speechless and quickly covered Yin Xiao's eyes. This Gunan's methods were really cruel. Even though he said he wanted to destroy the entire care for one's family, most reincarnators would not do such a thing. After all, it was just to fulfill the wishes of the previous body. Not everyone had such a killing intent. "Who dares to invade my care for one's family?" A loud and angry roar rang out, and a figure quickly dashed out from the front. It was the father of Gunan's body, the head of care for one's family, Gu Weiran. Seeing Gu Weiran appear, Emo Jiechi was slightly relieved. The hand that covered the little lowly's eyes also loosened a little. Seeing the real owner, Gunan did not need to use cruel means to force her. Gu Weiran didn't even have the chance to stand properly before Gu Nin shot an arrow at her, as if to slap her in the face. When, after his strength was strengthened again, the power of the Four Elements crossbow was also a little stronger. The arrow shot out at incredible speed and directly hit Gu Weiran's heart. "You?" Gu Weiran didn't even get to say a word before her body collapsed with a loud bang. Emo Jiechi was dumbfounded. Even if Gu Weiran was weak, he was still a dignified innate master. How could he be killed in a second? She could not help but turn to look at Gunan's side face, but she saw that there was no expression on his face, as if what he had done was a trivial matter. For Gunan, this was indeed a trivial matter. Ever since he killed more than a dozen innate masters in Langya world and understood the fighting mechanism of this kind of warriors, he no longer put innate masters in his eyes. They needed to mobilize their inner breath before the battle. Otherwise, they would be like ordinary warriors. This was their fatal weakness. Once they faced an attack that they could not react in time, they could be killed instantly. In essence, this was just a mage in the game. Usually, they were fragile. The magic shield could not be opened at all times and needed to be opened at the last minute. As Gu Weiran fell, Gunan seemed to turn into a shadow and disappeared in the blink of an eye. So fast, Emo Jiechi was stunned again. This newcomer gave her too many surprises, whether it was his strength or the way he did things. Chapter 17. Emo Jiechi never expected that Gunan was much easier to talk to than she had imagined. Almost as soon as she opened her mouth, he readily agreed. This made her feel very satisfied. Of course, she felt that this was the other party's respect for a senior of the same branch. In fact, after learning about Gunan's terrifying battle record, she no longer had the pride of being a senior. In this world, strength was the most important. If Yin Xiao wasn't an important karma for her in this world, she wouldn't have forced herself to do this. Yin Xiao. In the inner hall, Yin Xiao stood in front of Gu Nin nervously and said with her head lowered, Yes. Teacher. She didn't really understand why he didn't let her call him master and insisted on using such a strange word like teacher. Gunan nodded lightly and calmly looked into her eyes. First of all, you have to understand one thing. The current me is not the same person as before. It was common knowledge among the Aborigines that the immortal trainer was like a completely different person before and after the immortal trainer. Hearing this, Yin Xiao nodded vigorously. Gunan revealed a faint smile. He was quite curious about this side mission that had suddenly appeared. After all, this was the first time a new side mission had appeared since he had been here for so long. The so-called side mission was something that would have a major impact on the main mission. This girl in front of him would have a huge impact on the main mission of eliminating the 6 evil sects. This meant that even if he didn't appear, she would still be an important person. Every time this happened, Gunan would have a wonderful feeling of participating in history. You said that you want to be my disciple. What do you want to learn? Gunan said amiably, but there was no emotion in his eyes, only calmness. I don't know. Yin Xiao was a little hesitant. That day, after the care for one's family incident, I had this idea. Gunan raised his eyebrows. You want to learn how to kill? As if a sharp arrow had pierced her heart, Yin Xiao's breathing became a little rushed. She took a deep breath. Yes. Okay, then come with me. The people of the southern branch of the Righteous Path's 6 sects, Bright Pavilion, suddenly discovered something strange. Gunan, who had previously been called the craziest hunter, had suddenly vanished without a trace. Not only did he no longer attack the Xiantian experts of the corrupt path, he rarely even returned to his branches. A few days ago, someone curiously asked him the reason. Oh, I've almost killed all the innate rankers around here. Actually, Gunan wasn't speaking blindly. Innate realm experts weren't as common as cabbages. Almost all of the innate realm experts in the southern cities have been wiped out by him. Even without the incident with Yin Xiao, he would have stopped or run to other places to continue hunting. As for the 6 evil sects, they were also aware of this. However, they rejoiced that the death god was finally willing to take a break. In a hidden cave abode, 3 men and 2 women were standing in the shadows. That guy is finally willing to stop. Yes. A man wearing a green crown smiled bitterly. As expected of a superpower like the Bright Pavilion. We thought we could stand up to them, and then someone like this came. There's nothing we can do. After all, we're not an organization specializing in reincarnation. We can only rely on the Aboriginals. These Aboriginals can't handle this incomprehensible power. The biggest difference between the Aboriginals and the reincarnated ones was their knowledge. The reincarnated ones had many tricks that they had never seen before. Gunan. So it's him? If I knew, I would have risked the risk to send him back, a female voice said. If Gunan was here, he would definitely recognize that it was the girl who had tried to ambush him when he had just been reincarnated. Tangyu, it's too late to say that now. Moreover, based on the current situation, you might not be able to defeat him. All right, the higher-ups will soon send an extraordinaire here to try to send this Gunan back. A man who seemed to be the leader of the group interrupted their conversation. He paused for a moment, then said, Recently, there have been reports from the higher-ups that there are people massacring the civilians in our area. Tangyu, go take a look. The girl named Tangyu, who had met Gunan before, was confused. I know. Who would even kill civilians? That's what we need you to investigate. Within the territory of the 6 evil sects, in a small village in the countryside, a figure was flying around, wantonly slaughtering the civilians in the village. It was a girl dressed in black. She held a simple crossbow in her left hand and a dagger in her right. Her movements were very simple. Almost every time she attacked, she would take away a life. Moreover, she rarely made any unnecessary movements, which made her killing efficiency extremely high. If you want to become an assassin, the first thing you need to learn is not killing techniques, nor is it killing knowledge, but a heart that disregards life. When you get used to killing, then you can learn techniques. Her teacher's cold words echoed in her heart. As Yin Xiao slaughtered, she suppressed her instinctive reactions, disgust, fear, and excitement. This was the sixth village that she had massacred. She originally thought that she had the power of a warrior at the peak of the post-liminary realm, was a well-known genius, and had also gone through Mo-Jiechi's special training. How could a group of mere, ordinary people be a problem for her? However, reality taught her a deep lesson. Killing was far more difficult than she had imagined. When faced with a life-threatening situation, anyone could always burst out with amazing potential, especially when the other party had a large number of people. In the first village, when she saw the intestines of the first person exposed, she almost vomited. More than 10 burly men rushed up from behind her, each with a weapon in their hands. Even the simple and crude agricultural weapons caused serious damage to her. The nearest simple rake was only half an inch away from her neck. Fortunately, her teacher was here. Yin Xiaoxiao's movements paused for a moment. She looked back at the white figure standing by the roadside. Just because you like wearing white, you don't allow me to wear it. Really? Don't get distracted. There's still 2 more over there. Gunan's lazy voice sounded. If one escapes, you won't be able to eat tonight. You make it seem like I have an appetite. Yin Xiaoxiao secretly rolled her eyes. In the end, she couldn't compare to her teacher. It was difficult for her to still be able to eat heartily after experiencing a bloody massacre. However, she still obediently went over. Not only to complete the task assigned by her teacher, but also to be loyal to the thoughts in the depths of her heart. Kill them. Don't let a single one of them go. Kill everyone here. An indescribable excitement began to take over Yin Xiaoxiao's body. The endless desire to kill reverberated in her mind. Just as she was about to lose herself in it, a pair of calm eyes appeared in front of her. Those were her teacher's eyes. Even in the midst of the craziest massacre, he still had this kind of gaze. Chapter 18. What happened to me just now? In your words, you were possessed by the devil. What teacher would say? My head was in the clouds. In a small inn, Yin Xiaoxiao was once again awake on her bed. But this time, the one sitting next to her was Gunan, not Mo-Jiechi. Gunan picked up a bowl of porridge and chuckled. What do you mean by my head? You won't understand, even if I explain it. Do you want some porridge? Yin Xiaoxiao blinked. Teacher, can you feed me? No. Oh, after a fierce battle with Bai Chun, Yin Xiaoxiao finally felt herself regain some strength. She was quickly recovering from the exhaustion caused by the battle. Gunan looked at her with an indescribable admiration, as if he was looking at a beautiful piece of jade. He didn't believe in coincidences. Everything had its own set of rules. Yin Xiaoxiao was a natural-born madwoman, a natural-born fanatic, and a natural-born homicidal maniac. Even if he hadn't appeared, she would sooner or later have awakened to the deepest desire in her soul. Moreover, she was a lone branch character. For a professional player like Gunan, it wouldn't be too difficult for him to guess her identity and background. Then, you only have one last chance left. Yin Xiaoxiao was startled when she heard this. She immediately understood. Are we reaching our destination? There's still one more stop. Gunan nodded. He wasn't taking Yin Xiaoxiao for a stroll. Instead, they were heading towards the center of the immortal demon continent. That was where Tang Xian was. According to their previous agreement, after adapting to this world, Gunan was supposed to go to the center to help Tang Xian. Come with me. A moment later, Gunan and Yin Xiaoxiao walked side by side on the street. There was also a beautiful woman walking with them. So, young Master Gu and your sister are from Zhejiang? Yes, it's our first time in the central region, but we still need Miss Shangguan to be our guide. Sorry to trouble you, Gunan said unhurriedly with a faint smile on his face. The woman who was addressed as Miss Shangguan covered her mouth and chuckled, saying, It's all right. Be it his previous life or this life, Gunan's appearance had always been good, so it was not difficult for him to attract attention. However, Yin Xiaoxiao's expression was slightly unnatural, occasionally sizing him up with a strange gaze. Shangguan Xian only thought that she was a young lady from an aristocratic family who rarely went out. She would never have thought that when this little girl occasionally looked at her, she was actually thinking, how long would it take to kill her? How many moves do I need? How to deceive people? Oh, what am I thinking? Yin Xiao let her imagination run wild as she followed behind the two of them. Their conversation kept ringing in her ears. This must be the famous red tide levee. This Gu has long since heard of it, and it truly lives up to its reputation. Young master, are you also interested in the legend of the famous courtesan Qin Hong? Of course not interested. Time passed little by little as the three of them wandered. In the evening, the three of them had a few drinks in a restaurant, and Gunan said goodbye. Miss Shangwan, thank you for accompanying me today. If you don't mind, you can call me Xian. Shangwan Xian's face was slightly red, not knowing whether it was because of the few glasses of wine or because of the words at this time. Then, I will overstep my boundaries. Xian, be careful on the way. Gunan's face showed a slightly startled expression, but if you looked carefully, you would find that the depth of his eyes was always indifferent. Shangwan Xian nodded lightly. Young master, are you going to the central region tomorrow? Gunan paused, as if he was a little hesitant. After a moment, he said, My brother and sister will stay for another day. That's great. Xian will go to the Red Lake with you tomorrow. Okay. Miss Shangwan Xian left with a happy expression. Gunan and Yin Xiao watched her leave. Until her figure completely disappeared, Gunan said with a faint smile. What do you think of this woman? Teacher, do you mean how to kill her? No, from the perspective of an ordinary friend, or from the perspective of your past. Yin Xiao was a little silent. Although only more than 10 days had passed, when she recalled the carefree girl before, she had a feeling that it was a lifetime ago. Sometimes she thought that she gave up her prominent family, gave up her close friends, gave up her strict father and loving mother, and embarked on the road of an assassin without hesitation. Now her family might have found out that she was missing and began to look for her anxiously. Father, mother. A pair of hands gently patted her on the shoulder and took her back to the room. It was Gunan. Have a good sleep, and you'll be fine tomorrow. The next day, Shangwan Xian arrived on time. During the tour, she was keenly aware of the difference in Yin Xiao. This little girl seemed to have become more cheerful. Sure enough, she was just a little girl who was afraid of strangers. Once they got to know each other, she was still very cute. A smile appeared on Shangwan Xian's delicate face. Since recalling the past, the softness in the depths of Yin Xiao's heart seemed to be touched. She began to change back to the former lively girl, and a certain personality that was obsessed with killing seemed to be temporarily sealed. The three of them once again came to the red tide embankment, but this time it was dusk, and the red lake under the sunset was particularly charming. The dim yellow sunlight fell on the surface of the lake, reflecting the lake water into a fiery red color. Along with the tide, this was the origin of the name Red Tide. The Red Lake is indeed the Red Lake. Gunan stood on the embankment and sighed with emotion. Shangwan Xian stood side by side with him, one hand holding his arm without a trace, as if she was also fascinated by this amazing scenery. Yes, Xian, do you think this red tide looks like something else? Oh, what is it? Shangwan Xian showed a curious look. Along the way, she had been used to Gunan's witty words. Blood. A flower of blood exploded behind Shangwan Xian. She had no idea what had happened. Only Yin Xiao, who was standing beside the two of them, had a face full of horror. The shadow under Gunan's feet slowly stretched out until it extended to the back of Shangwan Xian. From the shadow, a human figure slowly appeared and stabbed the girl's back with a knife. This is Yin Xiao couldn't help but look at Gunan. She saw that he was expressionless, and on his right ear there was a dark gold earring, which made him look extremely strange. The next moment, a monocle hung on Gunan's face. He looked calmly into the distance. I just stayed for one more day, and there are guests. Hey, what are you looking at? Gunan turned to look at Yin Xiao, who seemed to be about to collapse. Chapter 19. Tang Yu hadn't actually seen transcendence in action. Not every force was as large as Ming Lu. In ordinary forces, transcendents were already high and mighty existences, and they rarely appeared in front of the world. But this didn't affect her confidence in Elder One, because this young elder named Wan Zhongfeng was ranked quite high even among the elders. In the ruins in the distance, Gunan's figure gradually stood up, staring at the other with a dangerous gaze. Pressure? Sure enough, the so-called transcendents are just third-order evil gods. Gunan's expression didn't change, but he sneered in his heart. In the observer's eyepiece, he had already noticed the change before he was blasted away, so he could clearly see what was going on. When he was only half a step away from Tangyu, the air in front of him was suddenly highly compressed, and the super strong pressure was like a heavy punch, sending him flying. This elder one should be a chi ability user, but he's obviously just entered third order, and his control over his core skills is still very weak. Otherwise, he could have detonated the high pressure in my body, and my whole body would have been blown to pieces. It wasn't that there was no information about transcendence. Gunan had long noticed that transcendents were very similar to the third order in the game in his previous life. From transcendence onwards, martial artists began to be called cultivators and awakened their own attributes, as well as the corresponding divine abilities. For example, Elder One's Chi Explosion was a type of divine ability. Wasn't this similar to the skills that evil gods players could gradually learn from third order onwards? Oh, not dead yet. Elder One was dressed in a green robe, but he had the face of a big man with sideburns. Coupled with his Western accent from a star realm, it gave people a very incongruous feeling. But Gunan wasn't in the mood to care about this, because he had already felt an astonishing killing intent. Elder One's speed was too fast, and he was almost in front of him in the blink of an eye. Then he reached out with one hand, and the air around Gunan was instantly locked. Gunan had the urge to roll his eyes. It's so easy for a chi ability user to bully a lower level. Fortunately, I had foresight. The dark golden earring on his right ear flashed faintly, and Gunan turned into a shadow and quickly fled. This time, when Zhang Feng was truly astonished, he asked curiously, "The embryonic form of a divine ability? I didn't expect that a mere fourth-level Xiantian realm like you would be able to comprehend the divine ability to this extent." Hearing this, Tang Yu's gaze couldn't help but flicker. So he's only at the fourth level of the innate realm. However, after seeing that shadow, she really didn't have the will to win. In this world, there are always some geniuses who made people speechless. This Gunan was obviously this kind of person. Being able to comprehend the embryonic form of the divine ability meant that he was only half a step away from becoming a transcendent. All he needed was the accumulation of his cultivation. If Gunan knew what they were thinking, he would definitely laugh out loud. This was not the prototype of god art, but a real core skill. It was the same as a supernatural's natural god art. However, he had obtained this skill by relying on his equipment. Even if you have the embryonic form of the divine ability, do you think you can escape? When Zhangfeng's expression returned to normal, and he said with a faint smile, in the next moment, his figure suddenly rose into the air, and he actually floated in the air. Then, he rapidly shot towards a certain direction. Gunan, who was hiding on the ground, was dumbfounded. He had forgotten the most annoying thing about air ability users. By relying on the control of air pressure, they could fly at high speed at the third level. Gunan frowned. He knew that the other party was launching a carpet search. He kept diving at a low altitude and quickly scanned the surroundings. His movement speed when he was hiding was not fast enough. This was an obvious weakness. If this continued, the other party would find him sooner or later. I can only give it a try. I hope this place is still the same as the game. Gunan kept thinking of countermeasures, but in the end, he realized that he could only take a risk. The difference between a second level and a third level was indeed huge, especially when the other party had such a special ability. Even if he used the 450 points he had, there was no equipment that could help him turn the tide, be it a necklace or a defensive equipment. Since the power within the range of the system was useless, Gunan could only use some methods unique to players. For example, he could use a bug. The 4-origin crossbow in the Evil God game was very famous, not only because it was powerful, but also because it had a few famous bugs, one of which was wind. A green crossbow arrow attacked from below, but when Zhang Feng shook his head slightly, this young man was still too impatient. although the result would not be any different. With a casual chi explosion, the wind arrow was directly shattered. When Zhang Feng's figure rapidly descended, and in the blink of an eye, he appeared in front of Gunan, still not admitting defeat. When Zhang Feng wore a faint smile as he looked at Gunan. Anyway, he could not really kill the other party. If the other party had the heart, he did not mind becoming friends with the other party. As long as the other party obediently left this plane, it would not affect their mission. Moreover, they could make friends with a genius who had comprehended a divine ability at the 4th level of the innate stage. Why not? Gunan felt the air around him rapidly solidify, and his movements became more and more difficult. He could not even turn his head if he wanted to. He simply looked straight ahead and said, "See this crossbow of mine? It can make explosive arrows." When Zhang Feng could not help but laugh. The air pressure around you has already exceeded 20 standard units. No explosive can exist stably unless you can create one out of thin air. Boom! Before he could finish speaking, a terrifying explosion sounded, and when Zhang Feng's entire body was blown away. The poor elder one had a dumbfounded look on his face. He did not understand what had happened at all. However, he saw a figure break out of the smoke. It was Gunan, who had forcibly torn apart the high pressure. Gunan was also affected by the explosion, but his evil god constitution was very strong. Why would he care about such a small injury? Gunan's lips curled into a cold smile. When Zhang Feng instantly felt more than 10 points of energy appear at the same time. He thought to himself, not good. He wanted to remove the high pressure, but it was too late. The explosion was far more terrifying than before. Tang Yu, who was standing in the distance, was also affected. The huge shock wave sent her flying and heavily fell to the ground. But Tang Yu did not care so much. She quickly climbed up from the ground and rushed into the explosion circle. Elder One, cough, cough, I'm fine. When Zhang Feng's voice came from the front, Tang Yu was relieved and quickly went forward to help Zhang Feng. But that Gunan's figure had disappeared. Could it be that he had been blown to pieces? He ran away. Elder One showed a wry smile. It was my mistake, but this kid really has a lot of tricks. Inexplicable explosions, and a physique that can withstand such explosions without dying. Chapter 20. Grooming Yin Xiao Xiao into a qualified assassin was part of the side quest, and the reward was yet to be determined. According to the rules of the game, the reward was yet to be determined, which meant that this quest could be explored in depth. The level of the reward depended on how far the player could dig. Gunan's consciousness appeared in the evil god's temple, and the reward was announced. 500 points. It was a reward of points. Gunan raised his eyebrows, and he could not help but feel a trace of joy in his heart. The side mission only rewarded one of the sin points and points, which was a very normal thing, so he was not surprised. However, he did not expect that such a simple side quest would give him 500 points. Don't think that sin points were important and points were not important. Without points, even with sin points, one could not advance. Even if one advanced, one could not purchase enhancements, and even if one bought them, one would not be able to afford them. In a very simple words, do you want to become stronger without money? For example, Gunan was reluctant to buy an accessory in the necklace slot because he was preparing for the 3rd stage. The 2nd stage of the evil god required 1,000 points. But now that Gunan had 950 points, he did not need to be too frugal, so he bought a piece of equipment without hesitation. Item: Dragon Heart Pendant. Purchase successful, deducting 250 points. With a flash of light, a crimson pendant appeared in Gunan's hand. The top of the pendant was carved with a Western-style dragon, but it was a little small, so not only did it not look powerful, but it also gave off a cute feeling. But this 250-point pendant's function was not cute at all. Dragon Heart Pendant allows the player to activate the general skill Dragon Strength. This skill cannot be leveled up. Dragon Strength automatically activates the user's strength and constitution. Lasts for 5 seconds, cooldown of 5 minutes. The Dragon Heart Pendant was a very famous item in the game. It could be activated once every 5 minutes, and it was very popular among non-spiritual players, but it was also very expensive. This skill could not be leveled up, but it was even more expensive than the Shadow Earring. One could imagine how powerful dragon strength was. Now, I have 700 points and 35 sin points. At this rate, when I advance to the third stage, I should have enough points to buy a few good skills. That's right. After reaching Tier 3, players needed to pay contribution points to learn skills. Moreover, the price was considerably high. The main mission can't be completed overnight, and the only side mission left is to kill the enemy powerhouse. Gunan calculated what he could do next. If only I could trigger another side quest. Well, the child was thinking too much. In the following days, there was still no news from Yin Xiao. Gunan could only try to go out and steal some heads. Unfortunately, thanks to Wen Zhangfeng and Tang Yu, his every move was being watched, and he could not go undercover at all. This was the vexation of becoming a celebrity. Before one could even reach the battlefield, the enemies would have already run away. In this sense, it could be said that the reason why the other side was promoting Gunan's reputation was not necessarily because they didn't want to protect their subordinates. In a flash, more than a month had passed, and Gunan had only managed to obtain a mere 100 points. He didn't even have a single sin point. It was simply a waste of time. 6th Asteroid Belt, Tavern Lobby. The central pillar of light slowly lit up, and Gunan's figure walked out of the endless void, a resentful look on his face. Since he could not obtain more points and sin points in the immortal and demon world, he temporarily left the plane. Anyway, if there was a need, he could go back anytime, and there were still many things waiting for him to familiarize himself with in the astral world. There was no day or night in the asteroid belt, and the tavern was always brightly lit. At this moment, only one person witnessed Gunan's return. It was Lin Ruo, who was at odds with him in the past, but after seeing him complete the Sky Blue City mission, she no longer mentioned it. Lin Ruo was not a fool. It was fine to bully a newbie with her strength, but Gunan was clearly not a newbie. The news that the Sky Blue City mission had been completed by an unknown small branch had spread far and wide. She still did not know the situation in the immortal and demon world, and did not know about Gunan's latest achievements. Otherwise, she would not dare to have any ideas. But on the other hand, there was no need for her to turn around to please him, so when she saw Gunan appear, she immediately stood up and left. Facing Lin Ruo's cold attitude, Gunan did not mind. To him, it did not matter what thoughts those who did not have the ability to affect him thought. When he returned to his room, Gunan noticed that there was a note inside. It was from Qin Xuanji. Private mission. Are you interested? Private mission? The information on the note caused Gunan to have some doubts in his heart. He could not receive any more missions in the Ming-Lu division, so he had no choice but to go to the immortal and demon world, or else he would not have to go through so much trouble. As for the source of this strange mission, Gunan had long looked into the information, but did not find much useful information. He only knew that these missions seemed to originate from some natural laws and were not controlled by humans. This made Gunan feel pity for a long time. If the mission was issued by humans, then he could find someone to issue the mission and do it himself and increase his sin points. Even if the mission was through another channel, he could leave the Ming-Lu in the future and become a solo reincarnator. Looks like Qin Xuanji knows more than I do. This thought flashed across Gunan's mind. Gunan had already expected this. After all, he still did not understand the unique existence of bloodlines, and Qin Xuanji clearly had many secrets. There was no day or night in the asteroid belt, so Gunan immediately went to Qin Xuanji's room. Qin Xuanji was currently in her room. After a while, she walked out of the room with her hair dripping wet. Gunan glanced at her. It didn't seem to be sweat, nor was it an ordinary water stain. Instead, it seemed to be some kind of special medicinal liquid. Gunan could even smell a faint fishy smell. A special cultivation method, Gunan thought to himself. Apart from strange people like him who relied on missions to level up, most people usually used their time to cultivate, and no one knew if the next mission would be dangerous. Although the Ming-Lu prioritized the lives of its members, it was inevitable that there would be casualties. What do you mean by a private mission? Gunan asked straightforwardly when he saw her appear. A special kind of mission. Before that, I want to ask you a question. There was a rare smile on Qin Xuanji's face, as if she had encountered something good. What is it? I know of a type of people who are born with the recognition of the world and can benefit from missions. Are you one of them? Gunan's expression turned serious. He knew that his strange behavior of looking for a mission had finally aroused the suspicion of others. Zhang Dongsheng and Tang Xian might have had their suspicions, but they did not say it out loud. Chapter 21. Qin Xuanji's deal was out of Gu Nan's expectation. Ming Lu is only a semi-open organization. It's not a good place for a chosen one like you. Qin Xuanji stopped smiling and said in a low voice, "Take me out of here, and I'll teach you how to become a solitary reincarnator. What are the benefits and limitations of a solitary reincarnator? And what is a chosen one?" Gu Nan frowned. "You know, Ming Lu's information doesn't involve this." Qin Xuanji nodded. "Of course, Ming Lu only needs its members to complete the task. They never give us extra information. To explain your doubts, we have to start with the concept of reincarnation. In the beginning, reincarnation is not done by the cultivators themselves. They are summoned by other world wills to go to other planes to complete the task. The world provides the reincarnator with a body, and the reincarnator uses the identity of a native to erase the abnormalities for the world will. In this process, the reincarnator uses his or her name as the core characteristic, as proof of self-preservation. At the same time, he or she has to fulfill a wish of the native as the price for possessing the body." With Qin Xuanji's explanation, a set of strange and self-contained rules of reincarnation appeared in front of Gunan. So this is what it means to end karma? Gunan felt that the mystery about reincarnation seemed to have lessened. That's right. Qin Xuanji's lips curled up with a hint of mockery. Nowadays, many people don't understand this. They understand karma literally and think that it's caused by inner demons. There's no such thing as inner demons in this world. If the karma is not ended, he or she will naturally be punished by the world will. It's just reflected in the native's way. As for the chosen one, it referred to people who were favored by many world wills. When they completed the world's task, they would also receive additional gifts from the world itself. Only such people would be passionate about completing the world's task itself. Others would only try to gain something in the process. However, the real name is the proof, and the karma is the price. Gunan felt that this scene was a little magical again. People like Yi Chong and Lin Ruo were only the outermost members of the Pavilion of Brightness, so it was natural that they did not understand the nature of karma. In fact, it was even possible that someone from the upper echelons had purposely guided them. But how did Qin Xuanji know it so well? Gunan couldn't help but look at her. As if she understood what Gunan was thinking, Qin Xuanji explained expressionlessly, "We, the blood kin, have our own inheritance. Everything we know and hear comes from our bloodline." Gunan coughed lightly and said without the slightest awkwardness, "I didn't ask you about that. Speaking of which, do you really want to leave Ming Lu?" "Of course," Qin Xuanji said in a tone of, "Are you stupid?" She looked at Gunan with resentment. It was not difficult to leave Ming Lu. As long as they completed one round, 5, of the mission, Ming Lu allowed their members to leave the organization. They did not even restrict them from spreading what they had seen and heard. Qin Xuanji had thought that Gunan, who had been kidnapped and brought to Ming Lu, would definitely find a way to leave. She did not expect him to be in no hurry at all. She had no choice but to take the initiative. After all, if she wanted to complete the mission quickly, she would have to rely on this fated one. Every fated one had their own specialty in completing the mission. Naturally, Qin Xuanji attributed Gunan's strangeness to his identity as a fated one. Gunan was very satisfied with the information Qin Xuanji had provided, so he reluctantly agreed to her request. His strength was indeed improving too quickly. Based on his current progress, he would become a transcendent in a few months, which was the 3rd rank of the Diablo system. If he did it in Ming Lu, it would be too conspicuous and would easily attract attention. If he thought that Ming Lu was a benevolent organization because of its various unrestricted methods, he would be too naive. All right, let's talk about your private mission first. Gunan still remembered this. He did not know if there would be rewards for the private mission, so he had to give it a try. All right, I'll tell you a relatively simple reincarnation method first. Take it as a down payment. A moment later, in a small plane that Gunan was familiar with yet unfamiliar with, two figures appeared. This is Langya World? Gunan looked at the familiar surroundings and asked in confusion. Yes. Qin Xuanji nodded without hesitation. I still have karma to settle here, and it has turned into a mission. Will karma evolve into a mission? Gunan received more information. Perhaps this is the origin of private missions. Gunan was actually still very unfamiliar with Langya World. This was a plane that was somewhat similar to Earth, but also completely different. They were both technologically advanced, but there were warriors and transcendent powers here. Qin Xuanji continued. Our mission this time is kill a person called Yin Fei, Gunan said casually. After accepting the external mission, he had already written the mission details in the Diablo Palace. Main mission, kill Yin Fei. Mission reward, small. It's good to be a chosen one. Qin Xuanji resisted the urge to roll her eyes and sighed sourly. Compared to the advantage of being a chosen one, even being a blood descendant seemed to be nothing. This time, we're all reincarnating with our souls. Let's finish the battle quickly and reduce the risk. Oh, your body might still have karma, Qin Xuanji said after a pause. Back then, she and Gunan had ascended to the astral realm with their own bodies. This time, they were returning in someone else's body. Qin Xuanji was an ordinary young girl that she had prepared a long time ago, and the one that Gunan possessed could only be a companion that he had found at the last minute. Gunan checked the body's memory and found that there was indeed a wish that needed to be fulfilled. This body's original name was Wang Sheng. He was born in a poor family in the nearby mountains. He had just turned 16 this year and was abducted by human traffickers 11 years ago. His adoptive parents couldn't have children, so they spent money to buy a child and treated him like their own. Therefore, Wang Sheng's wish wasn't revenge, but to find his biological parents. This kind of wish is the most troublesome, but it's a deep obsession. I have to fulfill it. Qin Xuanji frowned and sighed at Gunan's bad luck. This kind of searching for karma was a waste of time. However, they were all reincarnating with their souls, so the worst thing they had was time. Reincarnating with their souls was to quickly recover their strength and finish the battle quickly. This was because if the soul left the body for too long, it would definitely affect the original body. Is that so? Gunan touched his nose and said with a smile, Let's go find Yin Fei directly. Aren't you going to end your karma first? Qin Xuanji looked at Gunan in shock. Chapter 22. To Gunan, it was normal for NPCs to lure the monsters away. NPCs were there to be sold. Logically speaking, it was Qin Xuanji's mission this time. If she didn't go, Gunan could just leave. He wouldn't lose anything. Therefore, Gunan didn't feel guilty at all when he decided to let Qin Xuanji take the lead and follow her. After a while, after confirming that Gunan wasn't joking, Qin Xuanji had no choice but to sneak into the castle alone with a dark expression. To her, she was indeed alone because she couldn't see Gunan at all. There wasn't even a shadow in front of her. If it wasn't for the Bloodkin's special senses that allowed her to sense a gaze on her, she would have thought that he had run away. Not a man. Qin Xuanji could only curse in her heart. Then she obediently stepped onto the path of a lab rat. Yin Fei was one of the people who participated in the fight for the Bloodkin's legacy, like Qin Xuanji. He had a good understanding of the Bloodkin civilization and had many tricks up his sleeves. The entire Swallow Hang Mountain area was Yin Fei's territory. If the two of them wanted to kill him, apart from luring him out, the only way was to sneak into the castle. One could imagine how dangerous it was to sneak into the castle. After all, it was the enemy's base for many years. Along the way, Qin Xuanji could be said to have used all her tricks, but she was still tormented by all kinds of mechanisms and traps. After all, she couldn't just see through the mechanisms. She had to think of a way to avoid them. She couldn't even trigger them on purpose. Otherwise, she would be telling Yin Fei that someone had broken in. Even Gunan was a little shocked watching from behind. After all, The tricks of the Bloodkin were a little strange and unpredictable. They were different from what he had seen in the game. Even though he could mostly see the principle and find a way to deal with it, it was impossible to see it in advance. If he came to the castle alone, although he wouldn't be injured, he would inevitably alert the enemy. Qin Xuanji was indeed the one who had obtained the inheritance of the bloodline carrier. She was very familiar with these methods. She carefully dealt with them one by one and finally came all the way to the top floor of the castle. There were no signs of life in the entire castle except for the top floor, where the owner of the castle lived. This was the limit of Qin Xuanji's infiltration. Yin Fei had set up a large number of traps on the top floor of the castle, which was an absolutely private place, so he could detect someone's arrival almost immediately. Yin Fei was a middle-aged man with an elegant temperament. He wore a gray Chinese tunic suit and sat cross-legged on the ground. Beneath his feet was a marble floor covered with runes. With every breath he took, the blood-colored runes on the ground would flicker and flicker as if they were alive. The moment Qin Xuanji arrived, Yin Fei suddenly opened his eyes. The blood-red runes under his feet all lit up at the same time, illuminating the entire top floor. "You are Qin Xuanji." Looking at the strange face in front of him, Yin Fei only hesitated for a moment and quickly realized who she was. No matter how he changed his body, the nature of his divine soul would not change. Yin Fei was very familiar with his old opponent. Qin Xuanji didn't want to talk nonsense with him at all. She pulled a cruel smile at the corner of her mouth. The next moment, the black shadow that Gu Nan was familiar with suddenly appeared. Qin Xuanji's head instantly turned into the head of a snake. It opened its huge mouth, which was 100 times its size, and bit Yin Fei. It was like throwing a bomb at the beginning of the game. However, it had to be said that Qin Xuanji's decision was actually very correct. Even though her strength was similar to Yin Fei's, this castle was Yin Fei's territory. How could she benefit from delaying? Since the longer she delayed, the more disadvantageous she would be. It was better to use the killer move at the beginning and catch her off guard. The effect was indeed good. When Yin Fei found that his nest had been accidentally broken into, and the intruder was Qin Xuanji, he was already shocked. This time, he didn't have time to react and directly swallowed Qin Xuanji. Gu Nan hid on the side with hidden shadow. He was still very patient when he saw this scene. It wasn't that he knew Yin Fei very well, but according to his years of experience in the game, how could the mission be completed by an NPC? In the end, the players would have to clean up after him. So 30 seconds passed. 1 minute passed. 5 minutes passed. The blood-red runes gradually dimmed, and Yin Fei's aura had completely dissipated. It seemed that there was no trace of him left in the world. The top floor of the castle fell into an eerie silence. Even Qin Xuanji stood rooted to the ground. She couldn't believe that Yin Fei had died so easily. She had always been proud of her excellent patience. But in the face of such a strange situation, she couldn't help but feel annoyed. For a moment, she even wanted to ask Gu Nan, but fortunately, her remaining rationality stopped her. Revealing one's trump card was the most stupid and meaningless thing to do. Gu Nan was still waiting. He didn't move, and he didn't even release a bit of his aura. The reason was simple. His evil god's temple still hadn't given him the mission completion notification. As a professional player, Gu Nan always kept a principle in mind. Eyes, ears, and NPCs could lie to you, but the system notification wouldn't. Sure enough, as he had expected, a heart-palpitating aura swiftly assaulted him, and Qin Xuanji was sent flying. "Ha ha! Qin Xuanji, I didn't expect you to really dare to come back." What knocked away Qin Xuanji was a mass of sticky blood, and then it quickly turned into Yin Fei's appearance. At this moment, Yin Fei was very different from before. Not only was he wearing a blood-red robe, but he also looked much younger, and his skin had a strange red color. Qin Xuanji stood up from the ruins and looked at Yin Fei coldly. "This isn't the power of a bloodline carrier. You've surrendered to a god." The conflict between a god and a bloodline carrier was even greater than the inheritance of different bloodlines. No wonder it was a private mission. Yin Fei sneered. "The path of being a bloodline carrier can't be taken, so of course I have to take another path. Do you think I'm one of those idiots? I became a stepping stone for you, for no reason. Qin Xuanji narrowed her eyes, and the bloodline in her body vibrated again. The giant snake head appeared again, and Yin Fei was swallowed again. However, just a moment later, another mass of blood surged, and Yin Fei's figure appeared again. At the same time, even the blood-red runes on the ground lit up, as if revealing a ferocious face and laughing at Qin Xuanji. It's useless. Yin Fei smiled disdainfully. I believe in the god of blood, and I asked for this divine skill of infinite resurrection just to deal with you, Qin Xuanji. When he failed to fight for the bloodline inheritance, he saw several of his companions being swallowed by Qin Xuanji with the power of her bloodline. Since then, he had been afraid of this skill. Chapter 23. Qin Xuanji's face turned pale after using the transformation technique twice. It was obvious that she had used up a lot of energy. She believed that Yin Fei's divine resurrection technique could not be used indefinitely. However, without the power of the bloodkin, it would be difficult for her to kill Yin Fei without sustaining any injuries. If it turned into a battle of attrition, Yin Fei would definitely have the upper hand. This was Yin Fei's castle. Qin Xuanji was glad that she had called for help. Moreover, it was a helper who could receive the gift of the world and did not require her to pay too much. Aren't you going to make a move? Qin Xuanji shouted behind her. Yin Fei suddenly stopped moving. Even the glow of the blood-red rune paused for a moment. He looked behind Qin Xuanji a few times. After a long time, there was still no movement. Yin Fei finally calmed down. The smile of having everything under control returned to his face. Tricking me? It's useless to stall for time. Yin Fei said coldly. Although Yin Fei was already a god's apostle, and killing a bloodkin did not bring him any real benefits, it was still satisfying. The victor of the past was now going to die in his lair. He had completely countered Yin Fei's methods. Is that so? Yin Fei's expression froze when he heard a chuckle. He suddenly realized that the voice came from behind him. How is this possible? It was already unbelievable that someone could sneak into the top floor without a sound. How could this person get behind him? Qin Xuanji's face was also filled with shock. She had never seen Gu Nin in action before, but now she saw it. Moreover, it was an extremely strange scene. A pitch-black hand slowly emerged from the shadow behind Yin Fei. It held a shadow dagger and gently pierced into Yin Fei's heart. The sound of a sharp weapon piercing into flesh could be heard. Yin Fei's life was taken away in an instant. He did not even see his enemy's face until he died. Almost at the same time, his body turned into blood and seeped into the ground. Another Yin Fei was reborn. This time, Yin Fei's face was ashen. He focused on his surroundings and maintained a highly tense state. However, he did not stop talking. What's so great about a sneak attack? If you dare, Pucci. Another sword pierced through his chest, and Yin Fei fell to the ground again. This time, Yin Fei's body condensed even faster, and his expression turned even more grim. He no longer had the energy to talk trash. All his energy was focused on guarding against Gu Nan's attack that could appear at any time. The shadow sword rose from behind Yin Fei again. This time, Yin Fei reacted quickly. A short knife had appeared in his hand, and he swung it behind him. Yin Fei was actually very strong. He was half a bloodkin, so his physique was extremely strong. He was also a martial arts expert, and, on top of that, he was a god's apostle. If Qin Xuanji didn't use the power of her bloodline, she might not be able to defeat him. Unfortunately, he was still far from being able to fight with Gu Nan. Gu Nan's own strength was between the 4th and 5th level of the Xiantian realm. Combined with the heretical god's body, his agility and strength, as well as the existence of the shadow power, he could even beat a peak Xiantian realm master. Of course, the native peak Xiantian realm masters of the immortal and devil world couldn't compare to an expert like Yin Fei. Yin Fei's knife directly cut through the shadow sword that Gu Nan had created. A hint of a smile flashed in his eyes, but it disappeared immediately. No, there was no one behind him. Yin Fei felt cold sweat on his forehead. There was no such thing as a ghost in this world, right? It should be, right? Just as his attention was diverted, another pitch-black dagger appeared behind him. Yin Fei, who was highly nervous, reacted even faster than the first time. He immediately cut the short sword in half, but it didn't help the situation at all. He could cut it once, twice, but could he cut it 10 times, or even 20 times? To Gunan, this kind of hidden shadow technique was the most basic of the basics. It wasn't difficult at all. Just like in other simulation games, high agility professions could always stay behind the enemy, and were often used to bully noobs and show off. Yin Fei, on the other hand, was completely dumbfounded. The battles in this world were more focused on the moves themselves. Very few of them involved this kind of pure, showy fighting style. Therefore, when Gunan attacked more and more frequently, Yin Fei finally couldn't handle it. Once again, he was stabbed in the heart, and his life was gone. On the other side, Qin Xuanji was completely dumbfounded. She had never seen such a strange attack method. Gunan didn't show himself from the beginning to the end. It was as if Yin Fei was fighting with a shadow. He didn't even know how to attack, so how could he fight? Qin Xuanji knew that even if she was there, she wouldn't be able to do anything to Gunan unless she used the power of her bloodline to launch a sneak attack. No matter how powerful the sky-devouring python was, it couldn't swallow a shadow. This was a power that involved the rules. When Yin Fei appeared again, he had learned his lesson. Blood appeared on the wall in the distance. As soon as his body condensed, he immediately stuck to the wall. He couldn't see through the nature of Gunan's method. He thought it was some kind of spell that involved the law of causality. For example, the Blood Descendants had a kind of spell that had a similar effect. To deal with such a spell, one had to find a way to break the conditions to achieve it. Hidden in the dark, Gunan couldn't help but laugh. Of course, Yin Fei's method was ineffective. Sticking to the wall didn't mean that his shadow would disappear. Moreover, the power of shadow didn't have a restriction on shadows. However, since his opponent was restricting himself, he had a better method. In the darkness, a black shadow that was hard to see with the naked eye came to Qin Xuanji's side. Gunan's figure slowly walked out. He was wearing a black tight suit and a monocle. There was also a pendant on his ear that shone with a faint purple light. He looked extremely demonic. Yin Fei finally saw his enemy's face. He hurriedly said, "How should I address you? I'm willing to pay double the price that Qin Xuanji can't afford." Gunan smiled and didn't say anything. He directly raised his hand and shot an arrow. "Win, you don't have a mission." He helped Qin Xuanji because of the reward of the mission itself and the temptation of being a lone reincarnator. That was why he was willing to help. That was also why Qin Xuanji felt at ease and brought him here. The light blue arrow pierced Yin Fei's throat at a speed that was hard to see with the naked eye. The latter didn't even have time to dodge. Another blood reincarnation. This time, it was faster and faster than before. However, the amount of blood was decreasing. It was obvious that Yin Fei was at the end of his rope. As soon as he appeared, Gunan killed him with another arrow. As the number of revivals increased, Yin Fei's overall quality was declining. Otherwise, he wouldn't be this weak. Yin Fei clenched his teeth so hard that they almost broke. His opponent didn't communicate with him at all. He just wanted to kill him, and his method was so strange that it completely restrained him. Chapter 24. Gunan, are you serious? Zhang Dongsheng looked at Gunan, who was standing in front of him, helplessly. Yes, I've completed 5 missions. According to the rules, I can leave the Minglu now. Gunan's expression was calm as he spoke in a flat tone. It had been more than a month since the last private mission. The new missions from Minglu's headquarters had already been issued. Gunan randomly picked a few small missions. Due to the time flow, only 2 to 3 days had passed in the astral world after he completed them. Although they were small missions, the rewards were not small. Gunan now had 950 points, close to 1,000. His sim points had reached 44 points. He only needed 1 more point to unlock the 3rd equipment slot. Zhang Dongsheng was helpless. It was understandable that Gunan wanted to leave. In fact, there was no one in this branch who didn't want to leave. Even if they wanted to stay in Minglu, they could go to a bigger branch. Why suffer here? Not to mention that Gunan and Qin Xuanji were kidnapped. It was normal for them to want to leave. But what Zhang Dongsheng didn't understand was that the two of them had completed 5 missions. Among the 10 people in this branch, the longest had been trapped for 2 years because they couldn't complete 1 round. From the Sky Blue City mission, it was clear that it was not that easy to complete. But in the hands of this young man, everything was different. Completing the mission was as easy as eating and drinking, and he could even drag Qin Xuanji along, bringing her along to meet the quota. I understand, but can you wait for a while? The immortal demon world needs your help. Zhang Dongsheng said after thinking for a moment. It had already been half a year in the immortal devil world. The righteous and corrupt paths had already started fighting, and it had already reached the climax. Gunan, who was one of the strongest below transcendence, was extremely important. Because of this, Tang Xian had no time to come here. Gunan shook his head firmly. I have to go back to the red carp first. If there's a chance, I will go to the immortal demon world. Zhang Dongsheng was disappointed at first, but after hearing Gunan's words, he could only nod. This was probably the best outcome. Okay, I'll help you with the paperwork. Do you want to wait for Qin Xuanji? She has also applied to leave the organization. No need. I'm not familiar with her. We have arrived at the station of the 6th asteroid belt. The transport ship will only stay here for 3 minutes. Passengers, please do not disembark. As the electronic female voice rang out, Gunan stepped into the transport ship's 3rd cabin. Sir, please show me your identification. The stewardess of the 3rd cabin stood by the door. When she saw Gunan coming up, she was obviously stunned for a moment, and then quickly said. She had been working on the transport ship for a few months, but she had never seen anyone disembark or disembark from the 6th planet. This was the first time. After a while, she handed the identification back to Gunan and could not help but look at him a few more times. All of Gunan's identification information was naturally prepared by Ming Lu, but the information was inevitably a bit random. For example, in the column of his birthplace, it was written as the 6th asteroid belt. Someone was actually born in such a damn place. The stewardess worldview collapsed. The next station was the Red Carp, the terminal station. The cabin was a bit deserted, with only a few passengers sitting. Gunan was glad to have some peace and quiet. He found a seat in the inner area and sat down. Sister, what is the 6th asteroid belt? I don't know. It seems to be an interstellar observation point. Someone actually came up from there. Could it be a bad guy? Do bad guys dare to board a federal transport ship? Don't dream all day long. A faint conversation could be faintly heard. Gunan did not even need to look up to know that it was a pair of sisters talking behind him, and the subject of their conversation was naturally himself. Although the two tried their best to lower their voices, it was still a bit difficult to hide it from Gunan's ears. 2 unrelated passers-by were just curious, and Gunan was not interested in eavesdropping anymore. He was about to ignore the two, but his attention was attracted by their next sentence. Sister, this time Sister Gunan invited us to Red Carp. What is it for? It doesn't matter if I tell you now. She has a friend who has some problems with her cultivation of the mind and is about to go crazy. Hey, who is it? Do we know each other? For some reason, the younger sister's voice suddenly became excited. Sister, let me do it this time, okay? Absolutely not. The target this time is an ascender, and his mind is quite complicated. You can't handle it. The conversation between the two ended here, and Gunan, who was sitting quietly in front, raised his eyebrows slightly. Gunyan's friend and an ascender. Could it be the little white loli? Gunan was not surprised to meet the two sisters unexpectedly, because at this time, this was the only transport ship heading to Red Carp. But in this way, it would be easier to find Gunyan, and he could just follow the two sisters. The 6th asteroid belt was not far from Red Carp, and the transport ship soon arrived. Gunan also left with the crowd. Only then did he see the appearance of the two sisters clearly. The elder sister was a typical Oriental beauty, with black hair, black eyes, and fair skin. The younger sister looked younger and more lively, and was mixed race, with a pale gold color in her hair. There were already people here to meet the two sisters, and Gunan stood nearby and heard the conversation clearly. Miss Lu, Miss is already waiting for you. Please follow me. A man in a black suit stood in front of the two women, looking respectful. Gunyan is here too? The elder sister, who was called Miss Lu, was a little surprised. She thought that Gunyan would be waiting for them at home. After all, with her identity, it was inevitable that she would be a little sensitive to appear here to meet someone. If they were seen by others, it might cause a big uproar the next day. The two followed the man out of the transport ship station, and after a few turns, they came to a very remote hut. A delicate and pretty girl was already waiting at the door. However, it was not Gunyan. Gu Xingzhu? Where's Gunyan? Miss Lu frowned slightly, feeling that she seemed to be involved in trouble. This Gu Xingzhu in front of her was also a member of Care for One's family, but she did not get along well with Gunyan. Gu Xingzhu looked less than 20 years old, but she behaved very maturely, with a confident smile on her face. Miss Lu Xinyu, don't be nervous. Something happened at home, and this time, Big Sister and I are on the same side. How can I trust you? Lu Xinyu was indeed not nervous. She was only here to help, and even if she could not help, she could not help. We can talk about this later. Let's take a look at the patient first. Gu Xingzhu looked a little helpless. If he came a little later, she might not be able to make it in time. As she spoke, Gu Xingzhu opened the door of the hut, revealing a girl curled up in a ball with a dull expression. Chapter 25. Mr. Gunan, according to what you said, you and Bai Luo didn't know each other before this? Gu Xingzhu sat in the hall and looked at the young man who was drinking tea with rock candy in front of him with a dark expression. The tea that Care for One's family served to their customers was priceless. This person actually added sugar. Gunan didn't care what she thought. As far as he was concerned, he preferred sweet drinks like tofu pudding. Yes, I don't know that little girl. Gunan nodded without hesitation. I bumped into her on the side of the road. She seemed to be lost, so I sent her back. Would Bai Luo talk to a stranger in this state? Who are you trying to fool? Gu Xingzhu didn't believe a word of Gunan's words. However, since he was pushing the blame away, she couldn't find fault with him. After all, he was the one who sent her back. Then Mr. Gunan, oh, don't mention it. Just call me Red Scarf. I'm not thanking you. Half an hour later, Gu Xingzhu threw her cup angrily and went straight to the back hall. She only said, when Big Sister comes back, let her talk to this person herself. Gunan shrugged as he watched her walk away. Mr. Gunan, have we met before? Lu Xinyu, who was sitting beside them, suddenly asked Gu Nan after Gu Xingzhu left. Yes, on the transport ship. Gu Nan admitted readily. Lan Marigold slapped her thigh. So it's you. You. Were you following us? Lan Marigold wasn't dumb. She thought of this possibility immediately and blurted it out. Lu Xinyu's expression changed slightly, but she didn't stop her from speaking. She could only smile helplessly. Her sister was too straightforward. Even if she guessed it, she couldn't say it out loud. You guys found out. Lu Xinyu, how can you do this? How about it? Hit me if you don't like it. The Lu sisters, after another half an hour, Lu Xinyu, who claimed to be a negotiation expert, realized that she couldn't do anything to this young man. He wasn't going to reason with her, and he wouldn't do anything to her in Care for One's family. After the two groups of people failed to communicate, Gunan was first brought to a room by the butler to rest. No one came to disturb him, so Gunan was happy to have some peace and quiet. Until the evening, Gunan was still reading some books in his room with great interest. A gust of wind brushed past his back. Transcendent? Gunan looked at Gulu, Gunan to Gugu to Gu. Lu Gu transcendent. Gunan looked at Gunyan, who was standing in front of him, and his voice was filled with surprise. This was the first time he saw Gunyan's true self. She didn't look much different from her in the Langya world, whether it was her appearance or temperament, but her expression was colder. Gunyan was not surprised by her appearance, but in just a few months, Gunyan had actually become a transcendent. This was out of his expectations. Had she reached this step a long time ago, or was it because of the gains from that reincarnation that she had stepped into the realm of transcendence? Gunan believed that it was the latter. You actually obtained a divine ability treasure? Looks like you've had a lot of fortuitous encounters in the past few months. Gunyan looked at the bewitching earrings on Gunan's ears and couldn't help but exclaim. In terms of surprise, Gunyan was even more surprised. Gunan was just an ascender from a small plane. Yet, in such a short time, he had actually obtained such a treasure. And looking at his proficiency, it was obvious that he had a deep understanding of this divine ability. Gunyan was more willing to believe that this was a treasure related to his inheritance. The two of them were like good friends who hadn't seen each other for many years. They sat on opposite sides of the tea table and chatted about what had happened during this period of time. So, if it's Ming Lu, no wonder my people couldn't find you no matter what. When Gunyan heard that he had been kidnapped to Ming Lu, he came to a sudden realization. I didn't expect you to also walk the path of reincarnation. Isn't reincarnation good? Gunyan was slightly surprised. In his opinion, reincarnation was basically a profitable business. Gunyan shook his head lightly and didn't explain further. He changed the topic and said, So, you came to me to find an identity to use as a cover and become a solitary reincarnator. That's right, Gunyan admitted readily. There was nothing to hide about this. He chose to reveal the information about Ming Lu because he needed Gunyan's help. Of course, he naturally didn't say anything about Qin Xuanji, deities, and himself. Gunyan thought for a while and suddenly smiled. I can provide you with the materials for reincarnation, but in exchange, hey, don't you still owe me karma? Hearing that Gunyan still had conditions, Gunyan hurriedly interrupted her. He now knew what karma was. Obviously, Gunyan's karma was to take care of his family in the Langya world. Gunyan was also one of them. Except for those who were looking for trouble, she probably had settled the others. Only Gunyan was an anomaly. She couldn't settle him with common sense, so she had to bring him to the astral world. Bringing you to the astral world is the biggest help I can give you, isn't it? Gunyan smiled. With your fate so far, the worlds won't fall on me. Gunyan couldn't help but be silent. He knew that he couldn't fool the old fox Gunyan, so he had to say, what are your conditions? I have to deal with something right now. You don't need to worry about care for one's family. You will be helping yourself by helping her. Gunyan looked serious. She comes from the same place as you. Helping her is also helping yourself. Gunyan thought of the fact that the crime had not been completed yet, so he immediately nodded. Deal. That night, Gunyan moved out of care for one's family and came to the single room that Gunyan provided for him. He was going to carry out the reincarnation ceremony here. Of course, he couldn't live in care for one's family. I can't rush by Loli's matter. This should be a long-term event. I don't know how to complete the darkening. Gunyan was thinking while preparing for reincarnation. Darkening was a very complicated process. It was not something that could be done in a day. Oh, maybe it could be done in one day. Putting this aside, Gunyan now wanted to go back to the immortal and demon world to have a look. Of course, it was not because there was another little Loli there, but because of the main mission. Ming Lu had already taken action. If everything went well, he might be able to get in and help to complete the main mission. Although there would be a lot of team punishment and the final reward might be pitiful, it would not be too low. This was at least a medium-sized dimension. In the small dark room, Gunyan meticulously carved runes on the ground according to the method provided by Qin Xuanji. Chapter 26. In a remote graveyard in the world of immortals and demons, two young men, one tall and one short, were looking around, looking for something. Brother Su, why do I feel so cold? Let's go, the tall man said as he walked behind them. Go for what? In this world, the bold are full and the cowardly are starved. Brother Su was small, but he was bold. He scolded. Besides, isn't it half the day? What are you afraid of? These two cowardly grave robbers didn't dare to come in the middle of the night, so they chose to come at noon. This one, it looks like rich people. The two of them were amateurs. After looking for a long time, they still couldn't decide which grave to rob. It was Brother Su who pointed it out casually. The tall and thin man gulped. Under Brother Su's scolding, he finally began to dig with trembling hands. As he dug, he muttered, "May the ancestors protect us. May the ancestors protect us." It's not that we want to do this, it's just that the world doesn't let us live. After a while, the two of them indeed dug out a coffin. Brother Sue's eyes began to shine. This coffin is really beautiful. Quick, open the coffin. There must be treasures inside. Brother Sue, what are you doing? Brother Sue was still looking for tools. When he heard the tall and thin man's voice, he turned around and was almost scared out of his wits. He saw that the coffin had actually opened a crack, and a figure stood up from inside. Ah! The two of them screamed in unison, and quickly turned around and ran away. However, a shadow suddenly appeared and circled around their chests. In an instant, their lives were cut off. The person who walked out of the coffin was naturally Gunan. After having the shadow earring for so long, his control over the power of shadow was becoming more and more proficient. Two little thieves actually dug it out. Looks like I'll have to find a safer place next time. Gunan looked at the graveyard behind him and shook his head lightly. After a reincarnator left the reincarnation plane, the body they possessed had to be preserved properly. In fact, they usually found a place to hide it. In just half a year, the surrounding environment had changed greatly. It was a desolate scene. Gunan frowned slightly. Following the route in his memory, he walked toward a nearby town. 2 hours later, Gunan stood in front of a small pawn shop and rubbed his forehead helplessly. This city had also been affected by the flames of war. Now, it was already a dead city with few people, and this small stronghold of the Ming Lu faction was now empty. They didn't even leave any information or resources behind. It seems like they retreated calmly. Gunan walked out of the pawn shop, but he didn't find any more valuable clues. He couldn't even find the people from Ming Lu, which made him a little angry. Right at this moment, the sound of a conversation came from afar and attracted his attention. Fairy Lin, this is Qingyan Town. A young man's voice said, wherever the 7 slaughtering demoness goes, not even a blade of grass grows. She really is a demoness. The other man sneered and said, Zhang Tianshu, that demoness is chasing after the people of the 6 evil sects. She should be on the side of your righteous path. Silence, don't slander me. Okay, both of you are here to catch the demoness. Why do you have to fight with words? A soft female voice sounding a little helpless. Gunan turned his head and looked. 3 figures had gradually walked closer. It was easy to distinguish them. A woman wearing a pink gauze dress with an extraordinary temperament should be Fairy Lin. Next to her was a young man wearing a 7-star Taoist robe with a dignified appearance should be Zhang Tianshu. The last one was a man with a disdainful face, dressed like a Jianghu wastrel, should be Silence. The 3 of them were a little surprised to see Gunan here, because Gunan's clothes didn't look like a refugee in the chaos of war. Greetings, young master. Fairy Lin stepped forward and bowed slightly. I wonder if young master has seen a woman in black. Woman in black? The 7 slaughtering demoness you were talking about? Gunan's face showed curiosity. That's right. That 7 slaughtering demoness is the reincarnation of the 7 slaughtering star. Her killing nature is extremely heavy. If young master can find her traces, it would be a blessing for the world. Fairy Lin said with a serious expression. Gunan shook his head. I just got here. Fairy Lin's face showed a trace of disappointment, but she still smiled and thanked Gunan. Her words were like a spring breeze, and it was obvious that she came from a famous sect. At this moment, Silence's expression suddenly changed. He saw a seagull slowly descending from the sky, spitting a letter into his hand. Silence quickly read it, and his face immediately showed joy. Fairy Lin, I found it. I found the demoness whereabouts. Really? That's great. Fairy Lin was indescribably happy, but Zhang Tianshu's expression became gloomy. Silence glanced at Zhang Tianshu and handed the letter in his hand to Fairy Lin. This is news from my family. The 7 slaughtering demoness is in the Luo River Valley area, and she has already been trapped by the people of the evil path. Zhang Tianshu hurriedly said, Then we have to hurry over. The people of the evil path hate that demoness to the bone. Once a transcendent martial scholar arrives, they will definitely kill her. Fairy Lin also nodded, and her face showed a compassionate expression. The 7 slaughtering demoness is the enemy of the evil path. If we can resolve her killing nature, It might be a blessing for the righteous path. Fairy Lin is merciful. Zhang and Silent sighed. On the side, Gunan secretly rolled his eyes. In his heart, he had already labeled this Fairy Lin as a saintess bitch, but he said, "The 7 slaughtering demonists sounds so powerful. Why don't you let me help as well?" The 3 of them were stunned. The 2 young men looked at Gu Nan with disdain, and Fairy Lin also revealed a bitter smile. Young master's good intentions. Lin Jun understands. It's just that the demoness is very powerful, if young master. Bang! Gu Nan suddenly stretched out his left hand and punched the wall beside him. A muffled sound rang out, and at the same time, he interrupted Lin Jun's words. His punch landed, but the wall did not react at all. The 3 of them were very confused. The next moment, a crack began to appear on the wall. Zhang Tianshu rolled his eyes. After a while, the crack slightly widened. Silence frowned and began to feel a little impatient. After a breath's time, Gu Nan retracted his hand and patted the dust off it. Lin Jun was about to speak, but he put a finger in front of his mouth and then pointed at the pawn shop. "I say," Zhang Tianshu raised his head, but halfway through his words, he was suddenly pulled by silence. "Kacha, kacha, kacha." Zhang Tianshu couldn't help but turn his head to look, and saw that the crack was widening at a speed visible to the naked eye. In the blink of an eye, the entire pawn shop had completely collapsed. This